are live.
Oh,
Hey
we're
everyone,
here.
how is everyone doing out there today? Welcome to a is it a Game Master Roundtable? I feel like it
It
is.
is a Game Master Roundtable, but it's a Game Master Roundtable that's very intimate, a Game
Yes.
Master Roundtable of only two.
Yes.
Because can you imagine if we had four people in here talking about this Dungeon Master Guide? It
Oof.
would take 12
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah.
and we probably wouldn't even get past the first page.
Yeah.
So it's best to not do it with a great, huge group of people, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fred's got 3 hours worth of notes, so buckle up.
I said more than 2 hours, but I feel like,
Okay.
we'll
Okay.
see. We'll see.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I guess we'll see. So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so for those of you just joining us, we are going to be looking at this, the 5th edition 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. And we're going to just gush about how much we love it.
Sometimes,
Yeah,
no, no,
sometimes.
legitimately, sometimes we
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
I have to ask you a question before we start doing this.
Okay.
I'll be real quick, people.
Okay.
I'll be real quick.
All right.
How much do you use the original 2014 Dungeon Master Guide
I
if you're
did have
running 5e games?
I had to see what the rarity was for a pair of winged boots, and I had to clarify the drift globe. That's the two things that I've used it for in probably the last couple of years. The
Like
2000,
10 years,
well, the last 2 years for me. That's probably how
2
much I've
years,
used it. Yeah, the Dungeon
two,
Master Guide, 2014.
two things in 2 years.
Yeah.
And you roll, you roll, you run basic D&D, back me D&D, but you also run 5e
I
D&D,
do.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so do I. And I play in 5e
Yeah.
D&D, and I make a lot of stuff for 5e.
Yeah.
And so do
You
you.
sure do.
Like you've
Yes.
written books.
Yes. I have. I've written a couple books behind me.
It's not a good sign, is it? So I actually use this book a lot, but only because I'm currently in a crusade to remake everything that I didn't like
Mm.
from Wizards of the Coast and try to make it work for me and my group and other people. But it's interesting. I think this book is definitely better in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking through it, the first thing I thought was, this is a very good book for a dungeon master
Mm-hmm.
when you get a dungeon master guide for the very first time. Like new people starting out, it's pretty
Yes.
good.
Yes.
But if you're experienced and you've been doing this a while, it's probably not so good.
Yes.
So much so that you may not use it ever. So,
Yeah.
it's not that there isn't good advice in here, but it's about, is the advice and the tools that you have, particularly the tools, things you will reuse and have to keep referring back to. And there's your issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you when I was looking through the book. The book is well organized this time. It's
Yes.
actually much easier to find things compared to 2014, where even with an index, thank God they put an index in the first one, right? And but the second one's got an index, and
Yes.
they've actually made it much easier to navigate, not just contents page,
Mm.
but index as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have some thoughts on that. But before I get to those, just a big shout out to Phil Kearney. Thanks for joining us. How you doing, Phil? And my friend Dr. Feargood. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for joining us. We are talking about the Dungeon Master Guide 2024. Have just leave in the chat. Have either of you purchased this? Dr. Feargood, I know a few of your thoughts on the new stuff. Yeah, let us know. But as far as what Fred was saying, so the way that I looked at this, the new Dungeon Master Guide 2024 is, and you are spot on. I think it's very well organized. I was delighted to see everything, and it is very much laid out for a new game master. And the way that I approached it to determine that is I went back to my old basic book, my red book, and I took myself out as do I call myself experienced? I guess I would be experienced. I guess I
Excuse me. You've written three books now.
okay.
Working on a fourth book. You've worked with other on other projects,
Yes.
and you run a YouTube channel that is not like 1 or 2 years old and
Okay.
was come about through a pandemic. Like, yeah, I think you can say that you are
Okay.
experienced now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as an experienced dungeon master, thank you, Fred. I appreciate the confirmation there. You didn't even have to check your notes. You're like, yep, you're good, Wally. Um, so I went back to when I very first started learning how to dungeon master, I guess, as you would say it. And the most helpful thing to me when I first got started was the player's handbook. That was like most important. So I ingested as much of that, and then I moved on to the dungeon master guide. And that is, and I'll probably refer back to this quite a few times as we go through here, because I went back and I looked at it. I was like, what was it in this original? How many pages is this thing? It's not very many pages. This
No.
original 48 pages that helped me learn how to be a dungeon master. So, and like the new one, this one was also well organized. So yeah, I'll refer back to that quite a few times.
So the first thing that I thought was interesting is Jeremy Crawford had said this is the first time in a core book that well, as in a dungeon master guide, they talk about how to be a dungeon master and running the game and rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they were mentioning it something similar when they were talking about the player's handbook, where they don't look at character creation, they look at the rules.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's not true. There might be the case if you're looking at 4E or 3.5 or version 3 or even version 2 or version 1, but with basic D&D, it's always been organized that way.
Yeah.
It's always been organized that way. So they've organized it more like BECMI or Basic or BX, um, rather than the other more expanded, I suppose. They were not really expanded. They were just parallel really AD&D and Basic, weren't they?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Very much
so
so.
did you notice the text is significantly increased in
Yes.
size,
Yes.
sufficient for my old eyes to actually be able to read the text?
Yes. Yeah, that was very, very pleasing to me. Because I actually did look up, what was it? The Drift Globe in 2014. And I was looking at my book in the old one. Text was very, very tiny. I like the size of this text. Actually, this has encouraged me, as my books start to progress, the ones that I'm writing, I keep increasing the font on those as well. Yeah.
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 So
Small
this
font in
one,
that one.
small, yeah, but still bigger than most books do. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
and even this one, like the quintessential monster encounter one,
Yes.
the text. And you're right. I have noticed that you do keep increasing the size of the
Yes.
text.
Yes, I do.
Um,
Yeah, because it's
yeah,
good to read. It's good to be able to
it
read.
is.
Yeah.
It is. I would you believe it? This showed up. I didn't think I was going to get this until sometime next year at the end of the year because I'm in New Zealand and
Oh,
out of print.
nice.
But it showed up at my
Shadow Dark.
doorstep, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. And you look through the text here, tiny book, tiny book, thick.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon Master Guide, Player's Handbook, and a
Everything
Monster
right there,
Manual all in one.
all together.
And the
Yep.
text is huge.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still got everything there. I've
Yeah.
actually been using it more than anything else.
Yeah.
So, so my question is, what was your opinion of the art? Because I think the art, it's Wizards of the Coast, so it's high quality art. That's not,
Yeah.
we can agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Much of it is definitely evocative. I wouldn't say all of it is my cup of tea, but then I'm a bit older and, I'm not a teenage. Well, even when I was a teenager, I liked a bit of blood and guts. Um, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And whether the guys or the girls were a little bit scanty clad, it didn't bother me too much.
Mm.
Give me a bit of skin. But this is, but this is actually kind of a mix.
It
I
is.
feel like there's a lot of stuff that is more adult, and then other things that are obviously a bit more childish. Some things that are down like for a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old in here. But and I'm like, wow, do
Yeah.
you think that the 4 or 5-year-old is going to be able to actually write or read on some of this stuff? Because I think you've missed the point there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, as far as art goes, I like the purpose of art more than, I mean, I do like art when it's really, really good and fantastic and everything else, but I can appreciate like all kinds of different forms and genres. And that's not what art means to me as much as, does it depict what I'm reading?
Mm.
if I'm reading about something like, I'm looking at a page now where there's a looks like a dwarf that is point blank taking a shotgun to a hobgoblin. Um, and it's about a section about firearms and explosives. So as I'm reading, do my eyes glance over and do the pictures correspond to what I'm reading? That's the most important part to me. That and great depictions of the magic items.
Yeah.
Those are always my favorite art pieces. Is actually being able to see what that magic item looks like. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and I think you're right though. I mean, there's a wide array of genres. There's some goofy, cartoony stuff in here. I don't think there's as much of the classic stuff. I mean, you don't see a lot of like you just said, the blood and guts part. But
No.
yeah,
Bit of the D&D cartoon characters in there.
yeah, I
Maybe a
was
bit
excited
aged
to see
up.
that. Yeah, that was
I
super
thought,
cool. Did
yeah,
you
I thought
watch
it
the
was
cartoon
smart.
when you were younger or no?
Yes, I did
Yeah.
many times, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually have the entire series sitting in my lounge. Yeah, okay, I've got issues. Um, so I so I was thinking in terms of like artwork for a Dungeon Master Guide, I don't feel as hugely important. It's nice to have artwork for the magic items, definitely.
Yeah.
Maps are far more useful than artwork, I
Mm-hmm.
find. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the cover art to sell it to people and say, oh, this looks pretty. Because let's get real. Like the cover art, that's what sold me when I first bought my first D&D book. It was
Yeah.
just what was on the cover.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
it definitely does a far better job than 3.5 or version 3 did, whereas like an old tomb, I'm like, no, 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 no. Give me the AD&D cover, thank you very much. This is fine. I have no problems with Venture on there and
Mm-hmm.
some various monsters, different levels of monsters seem to be sort of percolating, you know, low level,
Avenger.
high level, mid level, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's all cool. No problems. I understand exactly what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the really interesting things about this book is and it still pops up. It'll be one of the very few videos that if you go searching that you'll actually find on my channel. I made a video reviewing the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide book about 3 years ago. I'd avoided it for so long because I thought it was such a poorly designed book,
Mm-hmm.
and I slammed it hard because it was the worst Dungeon Master Guide that Wizards of
Yeah.
the Coast had ever made. And they had made a lot, like six of them by then.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh wow, they must have been paying attention to me. And then then I realized, oh, that's
Yeah.
just my ego playing up here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because they had seemed to have addressed a lot of problems, but Wizards of the Coast, it's like Wizards of the Coast or Chris went and watched every single video that every other YouTube or every YouTuber's ever made about that guide
Yeah.
and taken all that feedback. And most of the complaints have been addressed in 2024
Mm-hmm.
in that Dungeon Master Guide, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I was watching a video a couple days ago because that's how I prepare for these types of things, and
mhm.
Chris, I think it's on the actual D&D channel. His interview with Chris Perkins, and he basically said, like, especially in these first few chapters, that they took a lot of stuff that was being discussed on the internet, on social media, on YouTube and stuff like that, and incorporated a lot of that. So there's a lot of people talking about stuff helped influence some of the stuff that went in here. So I thought that was pretty cool that. The open-mindedness of what to include, but like, oh, that's a good idea, we should, dungeon master should probably need this, because I mean you look at it and the table of contents to me looks like Reddit threads, like, how do I do this, it does, it looks like social media posts, like new dungeon masters asking questions, and it looks like in the first few chapters a lot of these are answered. Real quick, shout out to Forik and Jasper. Hey, thanks for joining us, you guys. Appreciate it.
So I was looking at the first chapter and trying to decide what I wanted to say.
Okay.
And chapter one, the basics, is definitely the basics. Like it covers running the game as a dungeon master,
Mm,
um, a first time dungeon master, and it does a reasonable job, in my opinion, from what I read. the role of the dungeon master is actually explained, and there's quite a few facets to that, so that's good.
Hmm.
What they need, really simple tips for being a facilitator. They're all great stuff. There's nothing wrong with them. They've even got some strategies for actually preparing a game session with steps and different time frames. This is all smart. Um, I don't know what you thought of that section, but I know the thing that stood out for me is I was glad they had taken the time to talk about how you should go about preparing your game session.
Yes.
Now, everybody does it differently,
Hmm.
okay? And I was looking at this and I'm thinking, there are some missing steps here. For me, I don't know if it's for everybody, but I felt like
Hmm.
there were some steps that were missing.
Yeah.
NPCs sort of popped up into my mind as like, you don't really talk about NPCs, and they're such an important aspect. It's like playing Dungeons and Dragons and excluding monsters.
Hmm.
NPCs are probably the next thing along that you really have to make sure you've got something, even if it's just a list of names.
Yeah.
And but
Um,
at
I
least
I
the
thought.
process of preparing a game session is outlined. They've tried to give you some reasonable time frames. 1 hour is a good idea.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have a half-hour one because I think there's a lot of people out there that try to do it in a half hour, an hour as well. Yeah. So yeah, what was your opinion of that?
Um, and again, so a few first. I thought there was a section on NPCs. I could be
Th-
wrong, but we'll.
there is a section on NPCs,
Oh,
but in
just
terms
not.
of preparing your game,
Oh,
they don't
preparing.
really talk
Gotcha. Yeah,
about
yeah.
preparing
Mm-hmm.
material for your NPCs.
Yeah,
They talk about everything else, but yeah,
that's true.
but there is a section on NPCs, but they just don't talk about, when you're doing a prep,
Preparation. Yeah,
how to go about doing that and doing that fast and
yeah,
what do you really need. I would have thought that would have been one of the steps in there
yeah.
because I don't know about you, but I know that if I'm preparing a game, I need to have at least one NPC kind of built and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that they can kill or at least talk to. It's going to be one or the other, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the basics, I thought it was good, and again, I'll refer back to my DM rulebook from basic and stuff, and trying to just step into the shoes of a brand new dungeon master. I might have played a couple of games, and now I want to actually run and become a dungeon master, and my idea of the the way to do that is to buy the dungeon master rulebook. Um, and so again, agreeing with you on everything that's in this first part, how to prepare, what is a dungeon master, what are my responsibilities, all that good stuff. um, and when you look at it from a newbie's or a new person's perspective, they're not going to know what's missing out, so they're not going to know about that NPC stuff. So this is going to be, the sponge is dry, and this is going to be the biggest bucket of water dumped on this, and they're going to soak most of this up. um, so I like it, and I'm going to defer to you as to what's being left out, and I'll just nod my head in a handsome, charismatic style, or shake it to the side if I disagree.
Sure,
I did
sure.
read some of this, but my retention isn't the best.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're busy actually doing work rather than spending
You would say,
hours and hours reading through somebody's very large book. It's a very big book.
yeah,
It's not a small
yeah.
book. It's a,
I do admit that there's a couple of things in this book, and I probably prepared the wrong way because they interested me now instead of me learning how. So I kind of like, the time that I did have to spend on it, I kind of like jumped to those sections like, ooh, this is cool.
hmm, yeah. Um, in terms of what is missing, like everybody's preparation process is different. And, if you look at Sly Flourish, he's got a process. If you look at somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
uh, everybody's got it, their own process, and everybody's selling their own process out there. So, but I mean, the only egregious issue I thought was you almost always have to have something on an NPC, if at least it is
Yeah,
just a list of names,
yeah.
or at least one name or
Mm-hmm.
a couple of names just in case you need somebody for them to butcher when they decide to go shopping or somebody to
Yeah.
give the clue because they have no idea. They've been told to go to the green door. They show
Mm-hmm.
up at the green door and they say, what were we supposed to do? And you've got to communicate that to them again
Yeah.
and you explain it to them and they still don't get it. And so you have to do it with an NPC
Mm-hmm.
and then you pray and they say, the NPC opens the green door, and now you can go through. That's basically what NPCs are designed for, right? Either to be cannon fodder,
Hmm.
or pass on information.
Yeah.
Uh, it's generally what they're used for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they could either had a section in here to help you do that, but at least just mentioning it. Yeah. For me, I always have like either my cards or something on my phone where I can just
Mhm.
go random generate, go. Okay. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So they had a running session. So running a session, it's really
Chapter
detailed.
two.
It's
Mm-hmm.
quite accurate. I think it's really good advice too.
Mm-hmm.
They even include how and what to use session zero for in a game. So, session zero is something you do before you have a game campaign or whatever. That's all really sensible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's good coverage. It includes a discussion around the social contract, which some people think is a nonsense and other people think is important to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been of the opinion that the social contract consists of you need to explain to people and make sure they understand this is supposed to be a group activity with friends. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're not friends, the idea is to become friends, and everybody's supposed to have a good time. And being antisocial or doing dickish things, being a dick basically, is not acceptable, right?
That's
Um,
It's funny you
yeah.
say that because I was watching Ted over at Nerd Immersion, one of his videos and stuff, and there was a section he said exactly that. It's like, don't be a dick. Like if you have a player that comes in and they want to be this antisocial character that always tries to go off on their own way and stuff like that, he's like, don't be a dick. I thought it was
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So the book actually explains that rules are not set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
That the book's rules or the game's rules are not physics. They're accurate. It's not a simulator.
Yeah.
That the economics is not going to be in line with logical, rational, real world economics.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are unaware, economics in the real world's not that great in terms of the study of anyway. So don't expect a book to be able to do it better. Um, Something that gets lost with a lot of new people, I think, and maybe the more nerdy extremists in our community is that rules are abstract. The interpretation of rules should be in good faith.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Big.
don't use them
Mm-hmm.
like a weapon. And they actually talk about this
Mm-hmm.
here, which they haven't done in the last one, which was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple good points there. One more thought, like on the social contract and everything. Um, I think with a game like this, there's a lot of feelings that can go through people's heads, and they don't know if what they're feeling is justified or not justified when occurrences come up. So to address a lot of those in the book, I thought was really smart. Whether people don't want to read it or not, I'm sure that section on those kind of social issues with their group and everything is going to help somebody's going to I think it'll either help them in a current situation or a future situation. And what was the other thing we were just talking about?
We were talking about session zero,
Af-
social contract,
and then
and
after
just
that,
yeah, and yeah, interpretation of rules,
interpretation of
and
rules, right?
good faith,
And
and
good
good
faith.
faith.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I was listening. I don't remember who I was listening to on that one, but they made a good point that as far as that goes, like just because the rule doesn't say you can't do it doesn't mean you should. Just be like, well, it doesn't say I can't do that, but yeah. And I think as far as the players go and stuff like that, accepting when a DM says, yeah, you can't do that. I don't care what it says. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah. Because there's a lot of
and
broken stuff you can do out there. I mean,
yeah, you can.
especially with the new rules, there's going to be a lot of stuff that was overlooked during playtesting or misprinted or something. I think there's
Or was
a few.
not even tested. That's
Yeah,
always a possibility.
yeah, yeah. I think there's some stuff going on with Spirit Guardians right now. Is a few of the things that I've heard, and using your reaction to cast cure spells, and just some really weird stuff out there. So for them to address that kind of stuff in there and how to handle it if it comes up to the table, I thought was a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was great. The other thing was there was a yeah so there really was a focus on a discussion around player behavior
Mm.
and like not exploiting the roles, trying to live out your, trying not to live out your anti-social fantasies in a group game. It's not
Yes.
a healthy thing to do.
Hmm.
It's all excellent advice. It's the stuff that people have been communicating for years, and it's a message that my group, who are made up of power gamers, almost all of them are power gamers or
Yeah.
optimizers. Same thing as yeah, if you ask me. But they're also all game masters,
Hmm.
dungeon masters. So they know when things are going too far, and they're a bit older too. So they're not like they were when they first met them. They have
Yeah.
sort of mellowed a bit over
Yeah.
time, and so they those crazy things that they'll try to do sort of gone. But also all that antisocial when you're younger, like I feel like as a teenager or in your 20s,
Yeah.
there's a tendency to just to get into things that you'd like to live out because you're frustrated either at work or in life, or you just like, I did this in the video game, why can't I do it here? You are playing with yourself with a computer, okay? And
Oh
you're
boy.
literally you're with another group of people now. You
Yeah.
can't you
Hmm.
can't go and kill all the chickens in the world.
That's right.
Um, yeah, and you can't rob every store and think it's going to be go down well, or
Yeah.
take everybody's stuff. You're playing with other people.
Um,
Um, yeah,
it is kind of funny because for those that might think that like including a lot of this stuff for to kind of I want to say coach DMs through these type of things, but that might I don't know if that's the correct word or not. Um, it's really not new. Like going back to my red book in here,
yeah,
there's a section under procedures and rules. And under procedures and rules, we have arguments. So what happens if a argument comes out at the table? There's another section in here about complaints. What if a player is complaining or something like that? So even way back then, they addressed a lot of this, and I think it's very beneficial for a game master to at least be aware of those, if not give them ideas on how to take care of those things if it arise. So
yeah, yeah. I did notice an unfortunate thing that was left out, and I suspect I know why.
was it the encounter
No
date?
guidance,
Oh.
no guidance on running theatre of the mind when it
Mm,
comes to combat, even when it's the most used method by our design team
yeah.
at Wizards of the Coast.
Mm,
They almost exclusively use theatre of the mind and not miniatures and maps.
yeah.
And I think the reason why it's not there is not because
They forgot.
Chris Perkins didn't want to put it in there.
No.
I think it's that Hasbro said we can't make money off that approach. Please just leave it out. That would be my expectation
Yeah, could
from
be. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right though. I
That's a
mean,
guess.
that's the way I started. I think most DMs. I think if you were to start with theater of the mind, I think it would help you when you eventually do, or if you ever do move to miniatures and maps. That's actually the way that I like to start new players off. Is we do everything theater of the mind. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's a bit disappointing that that's not in here, but you may very well be right. D&D Beyond's got some maps and stuff we got to be using. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've got D&D maps and you've got Sigil coming on
yeah.
that they
Hmm.
want to sell that
Virtual
and whatever
tabletops.
else they come
Hmm.
up with, and they just can't sell Theatre of the Mind because it doesn't cost any money. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a technique there that they it's a really simple technique just for running combat, and and that's tracking monster hit points.
Mm.
And they give you two different methods. One when you're tracking your monster hit points is simply for new people either subtract or add the numbers until you get to the your target monster hit point.
Hmm.
So you pick either way. I can do it either subtraction or addition, but I think that was sensible because some people find one or the other a little bit more difficult,
Hmm.
and that will certainly help them run their games. How do you do it? Do you
I
subtract or do you add?
Yeah, I was honestly I was taken back by that a little bit. I never even thought of adding. I've always subtracted. I've started every time during my dungeon master prep. I will if I know that there's monsters they're going to encounter, and especially back when I'm running Beckme because I still roll for hit points for Beckme monsters where I usually take the average for 5e. But I will write the hit points for a monster, so I'll put like Kobold, Armor Class. whatever, and then I'll write the hit points down and stuff. So I've already got the starting number, and then I subtract as I go. And the fact that they mentioned adding, I thought that was interesting.
Mm. I subtract as well, but then I could add or subtract and it wouldn't make any difference
Yeah.
to me. So,
Hmm.
but I still thought it was a wise thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's everything that I had to sort of mention about chapter one. I thought the chapter one, the basics was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Um, the only problem with this chapter is that it's really designed mostly for beginners. I'm sure there'll be a few experienced dungeon masters who might learn something from this or find some use in it.
Hmm.
But it's a chapter that really only has, you read it once and really you don't need to go back to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
I'd agree with that.
but it still needed to be there. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's a chapter you're probably only going to use once.
Yeah. And I still think that the overall purpose of a book like this, well, the goal is, of course, to make it for everyone, experienced dungeon masters and teaching new people how to run it. But I still think if they were to have to lean one way or the other, I would rather them lean towards new DMs.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. So chapter two is running the game,
running the
and
game.
there is better coverage of the player styles that was in the Dungeon Master Guide for 2014. The 4E Dungeon Master Guides were even better. Like it's not as detailed as 4E Dungeon Master Guide or the second one that they
Hmm.
put out for 4E. They've done a pretty good job. What I did notice is instead of just compiling everything that was in the Dungeon Master Guides from 4E, they've taken about three or four salient or fairly well established aspects of each player style, whether you're an instigator or you know, um, an actor, a storyteller, or whatever the heck it is you're dealing with here. And they have just focused on three things that they think you should do,
Hmm.
rather than telling you what you shouldn't do for that player style. Because one of the problems I found with the Dungeon Master Guide for 4E, which had a lot of information on player style, is some of the advice on what you should do for some play styles was completely opposite to a different play style for a player that you shouldn't do. So they've eliminated that aspect. So there's not going to
Yeah.
be too many contradictions taking place. And I think that's probably why this section is not quite as detailed as 4E. And that was probably a smart thing to do. Otherwise, it would have confused people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no comparisons with 4E. I skipped that.
Yeah, well, I don't think player style was a thing that was, only a product of 4E,
Mm,
but it had been around before then, for
yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
Um, they talk about group sizes and how to deal with a small group and a large group of people, which is all great stuff. They even talk about what to do if you have an absent player in your group, and they give you like multiple solutions for what you could do in that given situation. Probably not every option you could look at, but certainly enough to get by most of the time.
Yeah, and they give a lot of good ideas in here for like speeding up combat. Making sure that the turns run, how to bring in new players, what to do when you have somebody that doesn't show up.
Hmm.
Yeah, so again, I think this is all stuff that I've seen time and time and again on social media. What do I do for with absent players? And they've just taken all that and put it in the book, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe the one thing that I haven't seen that would be nice, and uh, it would have been the first time it had ever been done, as far as I know, if it had come out in this book, but it didn't, and that is Dungeon Master styles.
Hmm.
It would have been interesting to break down Dungeon Master styles. But maybe that requires actually doing some research. And, maybe the field is so
Yeah.
new that we know they exist, but we don't know what
Yeah.
they actually are. Yeah. Um, so I had there was another section there that I really liked, and that was utilizing the rotating dungeon master.
Mm. Yeah.
It covers a few different ways of doing it. I thought it was great. And one of the reasons why I really like this section is my group, as I said, are made up of all dungeon masters and game masters.
Yeah.
And we rotate so we avoid burnout. So even though I run a YouTube channel and I do a lot of dungeon master advice and I make a lot of tools and so forth on my channel, and I spend a lot of time doing that, I actually play more than I dungeon master because I can. I don't have to be a forever DM. So
Mm.
that means that um, we don't have to get to a situation where there are two people running the same game at the same time,
Hmm.
which you could do, which they talk about a bit. But no, it's more like, well, it's my turn. I will do this. You have a chat with everybody. You do your session 0. You run your campaign. When you're finished, the next person takes over.
Yeah.
And so that's how my group operates. And I really think it's great to hopefully encourage that mentality, because that is how the hobby and people playing in the hobby will survive without becoming very unhealthy individuals. Do you know what I mean?
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the way my group does it too. My Tuesday night group. In fact, Fodrick is in the chat there. He's in my Tuesday group, and we rotate through. In fact, usually we have two simultaneous campaigns going on, and like right now we're doing both Waterdeep, Dragon Heist, and Curse of Strahd. And so Fodrick will run Curse of Strahd for 2 or 3 weeks, and then my friend Seraph will run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and we just switch back and forth. Before that, I ran Fandelver for everybody. So, yeah, I think being able to switch and everybody take their turn, it gives you a break to be a player to get on that side of it, but you also get to see some unique styles and methods from your friends as well.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
one of the best
Yeah.
ways to learn is to watch or participate in games with other dungeon masters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are wondering how this works, and I'm sure this is the same for you, Wally,
Mm-hmm.
um, Simon, JP, Kirsty, John, Cajun, when they dungeon master, everybody, even when it's just 5e,
Mm-hmm.
everybody adjudicates everything completely different. It's like, oh, so hang on, how does invisibility work in this game? And Simon will say his
Yeah.
way, and like, oh, it's not like Fred's way. Okay, all right, okay, now I remember. So we,
Yeah.
so you cannot cling to the rules and think you're going to be all
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
like, oh, we'll just look it up in the book because it doesn't work that way anymore. Not when you've got the whole group doing everything slightly
No.
differently.
No.
Yeah. Um, Making ability checks, skill checks, saving
Mm.
throws, and attack rolls, the usual stuff is there. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they did anything fantastically original or different, or I mean, most of that stuff probably needed to be about the same.
Yeah.
I did notice there is less information about the abilities, the 6 abilities compared to 2014's Dungeon Master Guide,
Mm-hmm.
which I was a little bit shocked by. I thought that was not a very sensible thing to do. But they did include set difficulty classes, or
They did.
DCs,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
for D20 tests. It's limited, and it does have it doesn't really have examples in terms of ranges, but it does give you numbers. So they just say, here's a number, this is what it is, rather than giving you a range of numbers, which
Mm-hmm.
may have just confused people. So I thought that was a nice improvement. I think that was a lot of something that people were asking for ages, and they finally did it.
Let's see if I can pull those up on the screen. Is that the range, the 5, 10, 15, 20? Is that the one?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And then if you're dealing with a certain type of check, they actually gave you some examples outside of just the scale of 5 to 30. So if you're making certain types of checks, they gave you sort of an indication of what they might look like. And I thought that was a good thing to include. Um,
There we go.
they
Yeah.
even included degrees of success.
Mm.
You know how you can
Yes.
have degrees of success or
Mm-hmm.
degrees of failure. You can have success at a cost in terms of a dice mechanic. It doesn't explain or give enough examples, in my opinion, to know how to use it, but
Yeah.
they do mention that it exists.
Yeah. Um, I seen that as well. I don't know if that's something maybe they'll expand on in the future. I mean, we have very limited instances. I think the Medusa might be one if you fail by 5 or more, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's really not. And in fact, I could almost see somebody that's new to the game be like, well, what does that mean? I don't understand, because there's really not a lot of examples there for them to learn from.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
this
Exactly.
in this section too, as far as the ability checks, and here's an instance of, I'm supposed to be an experienced dungeon master, but I go through and read this stuff that's supposed to be for beginners, and I always pick up extra things like, oh, that's a good idea, or I didn't realize that, or that is something that I want to incorporate. And that was group checks. I've started using them a bit, but then I read through here and I really like this, and I think I'm going to use it a lot more. Uh, I think I'll incorporate it with, so like if there's one person making a check, they do the check. If there's one that wants to help, they can provide the help action for advantage. But I want to use more of the group checks. I kind of did that with the game that we ran in the live stream, the mystery at the Golden Surge. We didn't get to that point, but in the version I ran with my Tuesday night play group that we live streamed, at the very end we did this binding ritual, and we did more or less a group check where 3 out of the 5 had a pass, and I really enjoyed that. And reading it here solidifies more of how I can structure it. So I thought that was cool.
And to be fair too, like, group checks exists in this. Oh, hang on, Shadow Dark. That's a different game. Well, no, it's basically the same thing. It's basically the same thing, guys.
Yeah.
But 2014 Player's Handbook had the group check, and the Dungeon Master Guide for 2014 also had the group check.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is now people are actually looking through it and actually finding it,
It's
and
where it should
it's
be.
taken it's taken 12 years for people to get to a point where some of us have adopted it from the get-go. Some of it probably was taking place before
Mm-hmm.
even D&D Next.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was. But it seems to be one of those things where, like, oh, I didn't even realize I could do it that way.
Yeah.
And then other people are like looked at it and said, there's no way I'm ever going to do it that way. But it's there. It's a
Yeah.
tool. You decide to use it how you need to.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think one of the differences between 2014 and 2024 is just going back to the structure, where I
Mm.
never found this. And in this new book, everything is together, where I might look up one thing and then I start rolling into the next few, be like, oh, I could be reading about poison, and then I look over to the left and I'm like, morale checks, what's that? And then I can just go over there. So the structure of the
Mm.
book actually has me like looking at more things than I would have probably
Mm.
in the previous one.
I think part of that is it's only a smidgen. They've increased the number of very small tables to help explain stuff with numbers
Mm-hmm.
rather than just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph,
Yeah.
which is strange because there are probably less tables in this book than the last one. But they have put them in the key locations to help deal with a lot of this.
Yeah.
There's guidance on social interactions, so that's your dialogue, your role play. It's a tiny section. It's
It
very
really is.
small. I don't think it's enough to really get by. So I'm going to say Wizard Coast, you kind of bombed on that one.
Yeah.
You did so well, but this is a factor. Like, I don't understand why you would mess this one up. Like, the day and age of people who just have whole game sessions and there's no combat, just because of the invention of online play, and using Zoom calls and live plays being a thing. Like, it's so common for people to just play out something and have a dialogue, and that's all they really do for 2, 3, 4 hours.
Well,
It's weird.
I mean, exactly. So you talk about like the 3 pillars of D&D, social interaction, exploration, and combat I think are the 3 that are usually stated. And looking at the physical book, running social interactions is on page 32. Running explorations is halfway down the page on page 33, and it ends on page 34. I mean, that's 2 of your biggest pillars of the game, and they gave it just yeah. I would have liked to have seen a lot more, especially if I was a new DM. I mean, because that's, if I remember correctly, I don't even have to remember, because it still is social interactions and role playing and stuff like that. Still one of my toughest parts of those three pillars. I mean, I chose Waterdeep Dragon Heights for a reason because there's a lot of social interactions and stuff, and I was gonna say I sucked at it. Yeah, I sucked at doing that stuff, and I wanted to learn and get better, and that's why I chose to run an adventure like that. So
Mm.
for them to dedicate a page and a half barely is, yeah,
Yeah,
it's underwhelming. I think, yeah, as a new DM, I want everything. I mean, because
yeah,
that's just a huge part.
yeah. And I'm going to agree with Glenn, Mr. Welch, that there are five pillars, which is combat, exploration, which in my opinion, exploration is the biggest pillar of the game,
Yes, I
even if
like that.
people don't think it is.
I agree.
And D&D is not meant to be a combat simulator. You can make it a combat simulator if you like, and Wizards of the Coast is certainly doing a good job of that. And then, but you've also got your social interaction, your combat, and then the other two is world building. Not just dungeon masters, but players do world
Hmm.
building as
Hmm.
well. Whether you realize that they are interacting with your world, they're going to change it. Yes, you might have built a tavern, but they burned it down. Okay, your world changed. So world building and then character advancement is a
Yeah.
huge thing. Huge thing is character advancement and
Hmm.
but development, character development,
Yeah.
and yeah, character development is very much connected to social interactions.
Yeah.
It's very much the dialogue aspect of the game.
Yeah. I'd agree. I
I
like those
had a
pillars.
look, yeah, I had a look at the guide to exploration. I think the exploration section is quite detailed, and they do give you quite a bit of, they designate a large number of pages to that section
Hmm.
on exploration, and they give you a lot of information, but it doesn't always give you everything that you would need.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? Because I did.
Yeah. It's yeah. Like I said, both of those sections were just a little bit underwhelming for me. I don't know
Mm.
exactly what it's missing, but it just feels
Yeah,
like um there should be something else there.
yeah. I was having trouble. I had the same reaction, like, what are they missing? I
Hmm.
know there's something missing, but I couldn't place it. And
Puzzles.
then I thought I was thinking back to, well, yes, puzzles. Yes, that's true. And we were kind of going to get to that, but that's like the next chapter. But we'll
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
it now. They have no idea what they're doing with puzzles, and they haven't been able to hire anybody who does.
That's
So it's probably best that they leave that alone.
yeah.
And your best bet is to go and get either the first puzzle book that was made by Wally DM or the second one, which I think is even better than the first one, in my opinion.
Me too.
Um, and I read through it more than a few times.
That transition
Um,
to ad was well done, might I
yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We had to
Uh,
feed the sponsors there. Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think actually what they probably have missed is things like when you think about older versions of the game, the hex crawl or the sandbox, there are ways of dealing with traveling through a hex, what you would find there. I found it really interesting. I was talking to somebody, my generation, and we were having a discussion. I think it was Jasper actually, and we
Hmm.
were having a discussion about like the hex. You do not need to put your landmarks on a specific hex. If they're going in whatever direction that you need them to go, the only time they need to be on a specific hex is when you publish an adventure, because you can't have them just scattered everywhere. Like just put them where you
Hmm.
want to. But when you run a hex, if they keep going to a hex or a location and they're journeying, and all they're coming across is nothing, just move the landmarks. There's nothing around that sort
Yeah.
of thing. There are a lot of little things that relate to exploration that they probably need to
Hmm.
discuss. What the purpose is of wandering monsters, what the purpose is of breaking up your exploration. There are so many different aspects to exploration to explain, and puzzles is one of those, of course, but so is traps
Yeah.
and other things and hazards and um, heck, even exploration is the tying into finding out information from an NPC. But of course, there's not too much in the NPC section either, right? So
Yeah.
that might be a bit difficult to talk about that. Um, there's reasonable advice on adjusting and designing your own combat encounters. Like I looked
Mm.
at that and I thought, okay, it's not bad. They've done a reasonable job of trying to slim it down, make it less complicated. Um, and I liked that fact. I think probably the only problem, the problem with doing any kind of adjustment and design on combat encounters
Hmm.
is you have to always design to your group and the players at your group because they're not always the same, right?
Right.
And yeah, and thank God Wizards of the Coast. I'm so pleased. You finally, Wizards of the Coast has ditched the Adventuring Day guidelines of 6 to 8 combats because very few people ever used it.
Yeah.
And those of you who do, you are the minority. Welcome to your minority. Your minority is going to probably get smaller. The
Yeah.
design team don't even use the adventuring day. Nobody on the design team does. I don't use it. And it didn't really work. It didn't really work. It just didn't work. You never used the adventuring day, eh? I
Well,
never did.
I remember, what was it, like 4 years ago?
Yeah.
You're like, hey Wally, do you want to do a video together? I was like, yeah, let's do that. Like, what do you want to do? I was like, oh, I don't care. How about the adventuring day? Do you want to cover that? I'm like, Fred, what the fuck is that?
Yes, yes, it was exactly that. And it was
I had no
hilarious.
idea what that was. I was just like,
And
oh,
I
okay,
spend the whole time explaining it
yeah.
to you, and then you're like, really? Really? Are you kidding? Yeah.
Yeah, but the adventuring day is gone, and is I'm looking for what you're talking about. Are we going to get to that later? Is that now where they do the XP thing, where they
Oh, the XP budget. Oh,
yeah,
it's
it's
coming.
okay, it's coming.
Don't
Okay,
don't you
yeah,
don't you worry, it's coming.
yeah, because yeah, I'll save some stuff for that. I do want to just shout out a few things here in the Discord real quick. Let's see here, just to make sure everybody's included. Let's see. So Dr. Feargood says roleplay can be a hard thing for a group. If you have ones that do it more often, others will be left out and get bored. I do my best to have it, but I can fathom hours of roleplay. That's a great point. On that, there are a lot of people that will overtake the conversation in roleplay. And that's something that could have been discussed in here. I don't know if I've
Mhm.
seen that. Is what happens when you have one person. I guess that would be in your player types. If somebody
Yeah.
um, does talk a lot more. I would also encourage, as a dungeon master, for people to role play together. And I those are some of my favorite players, where they don't just talk in character to me as the dungeon master, but they will also talk to their allies and their friends. I think that's always um, very beneficial to have those type of people in a group.
I think part of the problem, though, when you get into a dialogue and it's dialogue rather than combat or exploration, where you might have more people participating,
Mm-hmm.
there's a tendency for players in a group to decide that the only person who should be doing the talking is the one with a high charisma score, right? Or who has a skill in intimidation or deception or
Yeah.
bluffing or whatever the heck it is. Um, our persuasion, we're dealing with 5e, aren't we? We're not dealing with 3.5. So there's no bluff. Forget about that. Be gone. But if your the game master is always just looking at the numbers in terms of, oh, you said this, now roll a check, then
Mm-hmm.
your players are gonna fall into that trap. I've told my group recently because they were asking me about charisma scores and so forth, and skills around that. And then we're playing Shadow Dark actually, and I said, yeah, unless you have an embolism and you barely can talk, I might ask you to roll dice. Otherwise, I just want you to talk. I couldn't care less if your charisma is 8. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you can figure out how to play a charisma 8. And if you have a charisma of 16, I'm sure you can figure out how to play a charisma of 16.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't, just bullshit it and make it up and fake it, and
Yeah.
we'll go from there. So I always encourage my group for all of them to participate in those conversations.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would as well. And usually the only time I'm asking for a charisma check is if I want to randomly see what happens, and especially if it's against what I think that NPC would do. Like if I think that they would not give in to what the players are asking, then I will revert to the checks.
Mm.
Other than that, I don't like to use them. I don't use them as much. I just prefer the conversation and to see what goes from there.
Mm.
Like I wouldn't use a persuasion you know, I don't know where I'm going with that. So I think you
Well, I
already
mean,
said, yeah,
I always found that unless I'm dealing with new players who are really struggling with like I don't know what to say, and they say I wanna try to persuade him to let me buy something at a
yeah,
lower
yeah,
price or persuade him to tell me some information, and they're like also, and I say, what do you say? And they're like, huh? Huh? I don't
yeah,
understand. I just told you. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, like if you were actually there, what would you say to them?
mm,
And they just can't get it. Then I'll get them to roll dice. Or
yeah.
if it's a
Makes
throwaway
sense.
NPC and they really, I didn't put a motivation down for them. There's
Hmm.
nothing to learn from them that's, significant. Um, but if, it's really, it's a last resort for me, the
Hmm.
numbers with that. I don't know that everybody does it that way, so it
Yeah.
may not really matter. There is a section on random encounters. Random encounters have their place.
Hmm.
I am relieved. I know some people might be upset. I think Sly flourishes. Um, not having tables. I'm so glad they did not include random encounter
Really.
tables. Explain what they are. You can give an example. Sure, there aren't any examples this time.
Hmm.
But again, random encounter tables are not hugely useful. You can't just reuse them. You have to design wandering monster tables, which are very small, like they're not really rolling that many dice, that are designed for your specific adventure. You can't just use any old thing, right? It doesn't work that way. And then there's different reasons for using wandering monster tables compared to using random encounter tables. And random encounter tables can be combat, but you don't need that. It's easy to make yourself.
Yeah.
You just need to know that you can make a list of, roll a 12-sided dice, roll a 20-sided dice, roll a 6-sided dice, roll a 4-sided dice, and then just have a list of things that are associated with that.
Yeah.
Random encounters are not that random. You know what I mean? They're actually designed around your adventure. But you just can't use any table there.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of glad they did not include tables or lots of them and take up space. That was kind of a waste of time. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's what I was thinking.
I didn't have an opinion either way, but I mean, what you said on that one definitely makes sense. I mean, because random tables could be different. I mean, because they're supposed to be based on the location you're in. So I
Mm,
mean, if you're on an island of dinosaurs, I mean, you're going to have some more draconic or dino type random encounters than you would if you were in a crypt or something where you would have more undead. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, a few examples of how to use it, I think is sufficient
mm,
there. And just be like,
yeah.
hey, you could just easily say, hey, every once in a while, maybe, a random monster shows up that's been walking around the dungeon looking for food or something. You can roll a die, or you can just, yeah,
And almost all adventures have some sort of wandering monster or random encounter table included in them most of the time.
yeah.
If as long as they're not like a one-page adventure or something like that. Most of the variant rules are gone. Did you notice that? Which
Mm-hmm.
is fine, in my
What's
opinion, because they never include pros and cons, and most likely, let I'm saying most likely they weren't play tested. I'm pretty sure they were never play tested. This is why they've been removed. And I think Chris Perkins pretty much said we
mm-hmm.
had a whole lot of variant rules. We thought they were a good idea to include. We didn't include pros and cons, and we didn't test them, so we didn't really know what their effect was going to be anyway. So,
I'm gonna be honest. I was surprised that they weren't there.
yeah.
But if you're to guess, which one people would be missing the most. I say missing the most, either most upset about that it's not there, or they feel like is a missed opportunity. Which of the random rules from 2014 or the optional rules from 2014 do you think?
Are we talking about internet rage that goes out of control and is leveled from players and game masters, or just game masters, or just players?
Whatever you'd like.
Flanking,
Yep.
flanking.
Yeah, I
It's going to
couldn't
be flank.
believe it. I was just like, somebody's like, yeah, flanking's not in the book. I was like, bullshit. Sure enough, yeah, flanking is not in there. I was very surprised because a lot of people use it. A lot of people like it. I've never used it, but I've played in a lot of games where it was a thing, and yeah, it's gone. I was like, holy
It's
smokes,
gone.
man! Wow.
I always offer it to my players, and I
Do
always
you?
say, I'm just going to remind you that if we use flanking, we're going to use flanking for the entire session. You don't know how many monsters are going to show up, or
Hmm.
if there's going to be one monster, or if there's going to be 12 monsters or 400 monsters.
Yeah.
So I feel like flanking is, if you guys want it, I'm all for it because that will be my advantage rather than
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
But you have to decide. So roll the dice, and usually my players just look at me and they say, no
That's
way.
okay.
We know what's gonna hit. We could be lucky in it, and
Yeah.
today all we face is one monster at a time, and we can gang bang it.
Yeah.
But the chances are that Fred is going to unload multiple waves, and there's just going to be so many, and we're going to be
Yeah.
swamped from all sides. They're like, no, it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dr. Fergus says, I always say if they can use it, I can use it. So, yep,
that's
exactly.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So, my opinion of chapter two is that this is a chapter which is semi to pretty useful. I feel like it's a
Hmm.
chapter you'll go back to, whether you're a beginner or an experienced dungeon master, and probably wind up reusing. Um, Probably not the most used chapter, but certainly a lot more than the first chapter,
Yeah.
which is more designed for beginners.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say that it kind of takes elevates a step up. You go to your next class, kind of a thing, going from chapter one to chapter two if you're a learner, and yeah, makes sense.
yeah. Chapter three. Now, for those of
Yeah.
you who are freaking out and thinking we're never going to get through this because we're only on chapter three, can I just remind you that the later bit sections there isn't going to be much to say about for various reasons, and
Yeah.
you'll find out. Don't worry, so don't freak out.
Yeah.
Chapter three, the Dungeon Master or DM's Toolbox, is one of the biggest sections there is outside of, say, the treasure section. The DM's Toolbox. So alignment is explained as a descriptor, not an enforcer
Hmm.
for a player or a monster, um, which I'm glad to see there. It's kind of like returning to the older books that explained it back in the day.
Hmm.
And it's like alignment has got lost as like, no, alignment's not a straitjacket, it's just a descriptor.
Yeah.
You can adjust it and change it. It is just a try to simplify explaining what's going on for the monsters and the characters. It's a shorthand, right?
Yeah.
And alignment was a lot easier to understand because we didn't have all of these silly um, combinations
Hmm.
that we tend to wind up having nowadays.
Yeah.
So I was glad to see that.
Yeah.
I bet you alignment is well explained in the basic game.
Yeah. So here's I'm going to pull out another book. One of my favorite. I won't go through and read them, but one of my favorite descriptions of the 9 alignments is Pathfinder Ultimate Campaign. If you're interested in using alignment in your game as far as players go and stuff, uh, and you have access to this book, the section on alignment is really really cool. Um, I'm going to be, I'm not gonna, I'm going to be honest about it, but I don't use alignment for players. I only use alignment for monsters. That's the when I was playing in basic, I use alignment all the time. Well,
Mm.
I actually in basic I started using the 9 things of alignment because of alignment languages, but that's a whole nother. Never mind, that's a whole nother story there. um, but yeah, I don't use alignment for my players anymore. They can do whatever the heck they want. As long as they're not doing things I consider evil every game, then we're good. But I love alignment for my monsters. I can read through my monster and be like, okay, chaotic neutral. I know exactly how they would react to things and how I would use them in social encounters or
Mm.
things like that. Yeah, I think that. Oh, I was going to ask you, what do you think would be? What do you think more players? This is a pure guess on our part. Do you think more tables, if they had to choose between the two, use alignment or flanking?
Oh, I think they'll use flanking more than
Yeah,
alignment.
I do too, which is crazy because alignment is still in here and flanking is gone.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I mean that's provided they're using a battle map. Otherwise, they're probably not going to be using a lot of flanking because
That's
flanking,
true.
when you're using theater of the mind, is kind of impossible. So
That's true.
it's not a really functional rule when you're
Yeah.
doing that. The chase mechanics are pretty much the same. They're still not very good,
No.
but you know, they do have a sort of an element to them that sort of reflects that there are stages. Like, you know, they even have a section in here somewhere, I can't remember exactly where it is, where if you're traveling from point A to point B, that you can break
Hmm.
up your travel into stages if you wanted to actually feel like it's, you know, it has some meaningful events along the way.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really what Chasers are kind of trying to do. I don't know that they really did anything special in there that's worth mentioning.
Nah. Nope. I
Um,
skipped right
the
over that.
Yep, that's because it wasn't worth looking at. Yeah. Customizing backgrounds.
Mm.
Let's get real. Very simple, very clear, but has some issues
Yeah.
on the backgrounds. And it's not because of the way they've explained it. It is how they have structured backgrounds now and how they've built them. Because now they're built around you get an origin feat, your ability score increase is now tied to your background of all things. And, and I'm like it's like a it's like an optimizer's nightmare
Mm.
to find yourself like, oh come, I have backgrounds as samples, but I need the customized background because it's the only way that I can shoehorn in my origin feat and how my ability scores will be laid out. The equipment is fine in the
Yeah.
background for me. Skills is all rightish. Tool proficiencies make sense. Languages are not there. There's nothing
What
going on
happened
with
to?
languages. I was like, what happened there? Like, it's and the feature that we had in the backgrounds, which was so narrative and had no game mechanics whatsoever tied to it, that used to confuse players and dungeon masters, hasn't been refined. It's just been completely removed and just replaced with feats. My entire group, all optimizers, hate the new
Did
backgrounds.
they?
And when I said, okay, well, there's customizing, and they said, yeah, but we forget about the feats, forget about the ability score improvements in the background. Thank you very much. And can we just have our feature that was narrative back in? Because, like I said, my group is full of dungeon masters who can actually cope with. There might be a narrative feature that might also have you know, a mechanical aspect to it. We're going to keep the tool proficiencies, the skills, the languages, and the equipment. Cool. The other things we can leave. So I think they probably should have just left that in the player's handbook, or don't even bother having any sample backgrounds and just give them the customizing one and be done with it. Like
Yeah.
you made yourself a really strange change. It's going to be remembered too. I can see it. It's
Yeah.
going to be hilarious.
It's funny because the character builds that I've been doing for 2024 so far is I've been looking for them as far as the feet. That's the first thing I'm looking for is like
Yeah, yeah,
what feet do I want? And then it's just like, well, as long as it has my prime requisite, and there's a 50-50 shot because you get there's three different abilities tied to each background. And so
yeah,
like if I'm playing a sorcerer, like which feat do I want, and does it have charisma? Yep, okay, that's what I'm picking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of my friends was saying, uh, really, I don't understand why don't we just remove ability score improvements out of don't put them in the classes, take them out of the race or species, don't put them in the backgrounds, have them just part of character
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
Just stick them there and make them an optional role. Like if you want them, you can. If
Hmm.
you don't want to use them in your game as a dungeon master, don't use them. Makes your game a little bit harder,
Yeah.
and that be it. And you'd probably do the same with your feat. Like don't attach it to a class or
Yeah.
a race or species or a background, and just let backgrounds be, you know, what you were
Hmm.
before you became the adventurer or hero.
Yeah.
You know, the fluffy things. The you know,
Yeah.
less mechanical and combaty.
Yeah. I'd be
But
good with that.
yeah. There are really no monster building rules or guidelines other than reskinning in 2024.
Yeah, I see
You know,
that.
the 2014 had extensive detail on how to make monsters right down to the mechanics,
Hmm.
which wasn't really that good. Let's get real. It was still horribly complicated. It
Hmm.
still is horribly complicated, and it didn't work out that well. But at least they had something there So I think everybody is sitting there praying and hoping that when they figure out how to publish their monster manual for 2025, there'll be some monster building rules in that book so you know what to do. Because right now, it just says you can change whatever you like. You know, there's a little bit of guidance around like a couple of resistances is not going to change anything, a couple of immunities is not going to change too much.
Yeah.
You can change out as many languages as you like. You know, there's a little bit of guidance, but most of it is pretty minor.
Yeah.
Heck, even the creature traits section
Yeah.
is very small compared to 2014.
I'm
If you want to make
looking.
your own homebrew stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. I'll even let's go to the creating. I'll put this up on the screen. But yeah, so I have traits. It's just like I'm looking at this. I'm just like you could do so much with this. I mean, like with traits, you could break out by monster type, like, and then have at least like a D20 chart or something. So like if you're creating an aberration, you could, put this chart. I wonder. I think somebody used to live stream that with charts and stuff.
Oh, so somebody decided to do D20
Yeah,
with traits
traits,
and
shadow dark.
special abilities. Shadow Dark.
Yeah,
Oh, and yes, somebody, not in this book, somebody has done a table of
yeah.
100 different monster special abilities and 100 monster traits, which is different from the special abilities.
Yeah.
Yes, that does exist. Heck, I believe they may even have tables on how they communicate, their social status, or how they
Mm.
respond in a social environment, and pretty much everything under the sun, including what they eat and yeah, or how they poop, things like that. The really important stuff, right? but
That's that's all in your Patreon, isn't it, Fred?
it
Yeah,
is, and
yeah.
it may not only be on my Patreon. You never know. Maybe something will happen in the future. The
Oh
Irma
yeah,
tease. But look, let's just pray that they have not decided that to leave out any general, decent guidance around making your own homebrew monsters, because this isn't going to do it for you right now. If you're a
yeah,
beginner or experienced, it's just not going to work.
yeah.
Um,
Speaking of art, I do like the art for this on creating a creature. That's
yeah.
pretty cool. The witch and the frog coming out. That's pretty cool.
hmm Did now this is always contentious. So you let me know if I need to shut up, Wally.
Okay.
Crafting magic items.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Oh my
Oh, here we
God.
go.
Okay.
Here we go.
Like, how do we not upset the
Oh
players who
my.
just play games and never dungeon master? And how do we not upset all the dungeon masters who are forever dungeon masters or do a bit of dungeon mastering and players? Like, it just everybody is on a different side of the fence with this one. Um, Crafting magic items, as far as I can see in this book, is significantly simpler, just in the way that they have described it. And they do have some useful tables of costs and days. It is much reduced, so which is a good idea. Like you don't have the sheer complexity that you were dealing with before, where there was a range. You know, you would have a certain number of days to do this, but there's a range of cost. It could be anywhere between 500 gold pieces to like 5,000 gold pieces
Yeah.
to craft a particular rarity of a magic item. So
Ugh.
that is at least not there. I have found that 2014, with a little bit of thought, I could figure out what was going on. If you were completely new or you need to have things a bit more defined, this was probably a little bit too airy fairy. It wasn't really that bad,
Mm.
but they certainly have improved it. And crafting magic items now includes some good guidance. Okay, semi-useful tables like intended use for the magic item, the history, minor properties,
Hmm.
quirks, beneficial properties, detrimental effects, sentient stuff. Most of them are things that were in 2014, like, the 2014 book. They just place them in the one place this time. They're not scattered throughout the book. You had to go looking for them,
Ugh.
right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that used to annoy me a lot.
Yeah.
Is trying to actually like that everything is not in the one place. I need it to be in one place so I don't have to keep flipping through the book.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Now, if I do recall, so we're in chapter 3,
three.
creating a magic item. but to create it don't you have to go to the magic items section to be able to? I thought I
No,
seen
it's
that.
not in the magic item section.
It's not.
It's not. It's in the DM tools. That's where it is. But at
Yeah.
least all of the creating stuff is there in that section. It's there
Yeah.
in that one
Okay.
place.
Yeah.
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 Was before it was some of it was in I can't even remember, but one part of it was in the treasure section,
Hmm.
and another part was in the back end of the book where you it's like DM workshop stuff or whatever it was,
Yeah. That's right.
which is now called DM Toolbox. So yeah,
Yeah.
they did that.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the things I did notice about their table though, and I can say this because I have had plenty of experience with it, unfortunately, and that is the crafting magic items for common rarity and up to rarity or
Hmm.
scarcity. You know, that common right through to uncommon to rare quality. Um, it doesn't cost very much to make those, and it requires very little time to make them as well.
Mm.
So a campaign could easily become a Monty Hall game if you are not careful,
Yeah.
because those prices dropped a lot, and even the time frames have dropped a little bit. I think for a common one, it's the time frames dropped by about half, and
Mm.
the cost is less than half than it was before.
Now, if you're, have you allowed crafting magic items in your game? Then, I mean,
Yes, I have.
okay. So kind of walk me through. So I'll kind of be like how I'll tell you how I kind of envision it.
Yeah,
I haven't really had any players want to do that. They asked me, they're like, "Hey, I need a kick-ass shield," and then a few sessions later, oh, they got a kick-ass shield. So if I were to allow crafting, I would probably not allow the players to just go like, here's the DMG, go nuts, find something you want to make and do it. I would probably have like quests and stuff to like, because you got to know how to create an item. You got to have the specific materials to craft that item and stuff. And then I would have them go like, okay, you have to go find Joe Matarazzo up in the mountains or something and talk to him or stuff. Is that how you do it, or
yeah.
is it?
I think they spelled out that process. Like it was always there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you had to kind of pull it apart
Mm,
in 2014. Now they basically say if you want to make a magic item, you pretty much need to have Arcana as a skill,
mm.
as a proficiency. You need to have the spell that you're going to imbue into your magic item.
Makes sense.
You need to have the money.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have the facilities and the tools to make that happen. And if you're using tools, you probably need to be proficient with those tools to do
Yeah.
it. And if there's any special materials that you require, then you need to make sure you go get those special materials,
Yeah.
and then you can make that magic item. But I mean that really means that common to uncommon are the most likely, and unless you've got about half a year available, you're
Mm-hmm.
probably not making a rare item because it takes so long.
Yeah.
And anything higher than that, yeah, you're going to have to retire
Yeah.
because you're going to be spending a long time
Yeah.
doing that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's a full-time job. Your project is probably a year long, if not longer.
Hmm.
And some things you probably won't be able to craft because you're not a god. You know what I mean? And you're not a lich, or at least not
Yeah.
yet. So yeah,
Or a
so
72nd level wizard.
yeah. Oh, see, exactly. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I tend to do it that way, and they just did exactly what in the book they just did exactly that sort of thing there. I've run Monty Hall campaigns, by the way, people. For those of you who are wondering, they are an interesting experience. I don't I don't encourage it. Not unless you want to
Yeah.
cry,
Yeah.
because if when the dungeon master cries, the group is doomed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, Making your own spells is not detailed, but it just basically says you can get by just copying some of the stuff that's in the player's handbook. I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at it now and just rolling my eyes. Just, yeah.
Yeah, and that's all we need to say about that.
You know,
Curses. There's decent information on curses
Yeah.
with stuff that you would expect, like, talking about how curses can be spells or creatures and
Mm-hmm.
magic items, or they could just be narrative in some way, or
Mm-hmm.
an environmental or demonic possession. I actually was really impressed, and I like using curses
I do
even
too.
though players hate them. Unless, of course, that curse is I become a werewolf or I become a vampire.
Hmm.
And then they're all for it until they bite or kill their entire party. Um,
I think one
yeah.
of the interesting things in this section, especially for a new GM that wouldn't know how to do this, is in the narrative curses, because pretty much through this whole page they talk about these curses are there until you cast a remove curse spell, which should end the spell. But in a narrative curse, it basically says that you, as a dungeon master, if you have a curse that is part of your story or part of the um, history of something or the ancestry. I mean, if they open up, the Lost Ark Covenant thing, Raiders of the Lost Ark style, uh, not all the times is remove curse going to work for them. And it's okay that you include those types of curses, and tell your players, sorry, either it doesn't work at all or it just subsides it for a little bit. I thought
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very balanced view, and
Yeah.
it really reflects how a lot of people have been doing things
Mm-hmm.
without going one way or the other to the extreme. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The magical contagions
Mm-hmm.
only has three examples.
Mm-hmm.
And did you notice the diseases have been completely removed?
Yeah,
So
the contagions
I,
now. Yeah.
I, so obviously they have decided that death is still fun, so we can keep that in the game, but
Disease.
diseases are not
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, is
Mm.
responsible
That
for the
could be.
decision not to include diseases. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is one section for some dungeon masters that are like, fine, I'm going back to my older DMG because you didn't provide me with anything this time around. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
It's not like did you ever? I don't think dungeon masters do this. I know I never would. Would you ever consider, like, I need to include diseases because everybody was suffering from COVID a couple of years ago?
No.
So I guess
No.
so it's not, I
No.
think this is the marketing team probably is like,
Yeah.
you need to not say anything about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had my fights to the death with COVID too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in all serious. But yeah, so I whatever. Flipping the page.
yeah. Flipping the page.
Let's talk about death.
Um,
Speaking of which, let's
Death.
talk about
Yes. Now,
death.
death. So we get death. I was really impressed and happy to see this.
Yeah, they did good.
Um, the death of a character is actually covered well,
Hmm.
and they give you six different approaches
Hmm.
in terms of discussing what to do when the character dies. And they're not just explain to the players in a nice way, it's time to make a new character. So, do you know what I mean? It's like, that's not six approaches. That's the same way, just described different ways.
rip,
So,
rip the character
to,
sheet.
to, but to be fair, there's probably 20 or more different ways of dealing with character death
Yeah.
and TPKs.
Hmm.
But they have at least addressed some of them, and they've given, a few options so that game masters can, you know,
Hmm.
decide how they're going to approach it, and what will work for their players in their group. Well done. It's about time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's some really solid advice here. I remember when we were playing back in the Beckme days, just because you were so fragile and stuff. Once the characters were able to afford a raised dead, they they did that all the damn time. They're always,
Yeah.
as long as it wasn't a TPK, like, oh man, my character died. Yeah, so did mine. All right, you guys, take us back to the church. You gotta get us back up.
My, my group are kind of almost like feel like they're sadists at times. Like, there's two individuals in my group who do not like their characters dying, and the others couldn't care less. And one goes out of his way to get killed as many times as he possibly can. But when anybody ever dies
Yeah.
and somebody says, "Oh, we should use raised dead," Nobody does in my group anymore.
Really?
It's always reincarnate,
Okay.
reincarnate, reincarnate. Literally, they start
That's
chanting it,
awesome.
and they're like, "Can we find the biggest, craziest table of what they could come back as?" And then
Wow.
the person sitting there rebuilding their character because they were a Goliath and they were like a paladin, and now like a gnome.
I like that
So
approach. Yeah.
they got a very healthy approach to death.
Yeah.
Reincarnate chanting is fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this is an important chapter though because there are a lot of folks that aren't okay with their characters dying and stuff like
yeah,
that. I mean, I know from playing in some games when things have gotten like um, like oh shit, kind of a thing. Like my heart sped up a few times and kicked into survival or whatever else, trying to think, okay, how the hell do we get out of this? How do we survive? So I think reading through this, no matter what your level or of dungeon master you are, I think there's a lot of good points in here to keep in mind if that comes up. And
mm,
also, I think it's probably good too to know your players.
yeah,
Are they if their character gets their guts ripped out by a zombie, are they going to be okay with that, or
mm.
do you need to yeah, good chapter.
Let them come back as a zombie.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, I'm glad they've addressed it,
Yeah.
and yeah, well done. There is more than enough information on doors now. The types of doors, the locks on those doors, the secret doors, and the portcullis. So there was information in 2014. They have definitely expanded this. There's a lot more going on now.
I have a problem
They've
with it.
even given you some DCs or difficulty class numbers to use as a guide if you need that.
I have a
So
problem with this one.
doors.
Yeah, the doors.
Uh, uh,
So,
I know. Please explain.
the metal
Um,
door. So I'm looking at this. Let me pull it up on the screen. I'm
sure. For those of you
okay.
who don't understand, there are a lot of doors in puzzle
There's a lot
books.
of door puzzles.
So this is a very important issue for Wally DM. For those of you who
Yes.
have not figured it out right now, I'm using this live stream to talk about the Dungeon Master Guide and promote his books as many times as I can.
Appreciate it. So it says if you just glance, because I didn't read all of this here, but I did glance at this chart, this table, and it
Mm.
says a metal door has an armor class of 19 and 72 hit points. A stone door has an armor class of 17 and hit points 40. Maybe I could see the stone door, but the metal door, are we going? What happens when those 72 hit points are gone?
Apparently, the door is no longer there.
Oh, no, you can't do that. I can understand a glass door, obviously. I can
Yes.
understand a wooden door. You could spend the time. I would. I would think it'd take quite a while to hatch it, even though it says 18 hit points, to hatch it through a wooden door to the point where you could get it open and go through it. But a stone door and a metal door, come on, don't give it hit points. That just says I can just sit here and smash it with my warhammer long enough until the 72 hit points are done, and then it's gonna open. And I don't like this. Bad wizards, bad.
Bad wizards. Wally, you just don't understand. Everything can be solved with violence, either that or fire. So, you
No,
know,
yeah,
if you can't melt the stone door or the metal door down with your blasts of fire bolts, like in a fireball, like there's something wrong with the game. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Now I can see the DC to open as a recommendation because yeah, maybe they can battering ram it open or something, or that barbarian can rage and go into it, and I see maybe a high difficult level DC, but yeah, don't give my metal door hit points. Says here in the
uh,
Dungeon Master Guide that a metal door only has 72 hit points. So I'm just gonna hit it.
yeah, yep.
Mm.
It is a shame, but
Worst part about
I'm
the
not
whole book
gonna
right there.
I'm not gonna crucify them. It won't affect me too much, but it will definitely affect Wally because there are so many doors
Yeah.
in the products that he makes. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Doors don't have hit points in my games.
doors don't have hip door points. So I had a look at the dungeon quirks table. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the breakdown of different areas in a dungeon was a welcome addition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there was enough. I would have
Mm-hmm.
liked to have seen them do a bit more because, you know, they had some of that before in the back of the old Dungeon Master Guide for 2014.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they've removed a lot of the dungeon generation tables that did exist, and I think there was value to them. There was value when they were in AD&D. There's value in older versions of D&D. There was value now. It is not like it's not like every dungeon location and dungeon generating table is just going to be making a dungeon where people torture people, execute people, or hold them in prison cells. Like there can be different types of dungeons, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was a loss. I think that was a mistake to take that out.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very disappointing to me. I mean, going back again to my very first Dungeon Master Guide, the DM rulebook, that was even more than probably on the same level as Treasure. But when I was creating my dungeon maps, the creating a dungeon and the stocking it and stuff like that was always the most important. So, and I do believe that the 2014 had a lot more tables and stuff. Yeah, they could have went 14, 15, 16 pages here for me, and I would have been happy. But oh well.
Yeah. And the problem is by not having tables, and I think the tables need
Yeah.
to have a descriptor. What is a candelier and candelabra? You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of these things, some people will know what they are, and of course you can look it up on the internet. But why are you having to look it up on the internet where you could just stick in the
Mm-hmm.
book and it's only going to take you a sentence to actually explain?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was some value in actually making sure
Yeah.
those tables were there.
Yeah,
I always,
stocking your dungeon. The
yeah,
AD&D first edition. I mean, Gary
yeah,
Gygax with all of his wonky, weird, random tables. I mean, you can go through there and you can stock an entire dungeon with the tables in the first edition AD&D book.
yeah. And you don't have to roll dice; you just pick off the
Yeah,
list.
you just pick up. Yeah,
Yeah, just pick off the
it
list.
gives you ideas as you're building
Yeah,
a dungeon. Random tables aren't always something that has to be randomly determined. It's a list of ideas that you
yeah,
can randomly determine. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's a big miss, especially for a new DM that wants to create their own dungeons, which is part of Dungeons and Dragons. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think maybe it's called Dungeons or something else.
yeah.
But anyway, the dungeons aren't there. Environmental effects looks like they have been shortened and just added from Tasha's guide, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, as far as I can tell. So they're pretty much those.
Yeah.
Yep. And fear and mental stress effects, that section does a much better job of actually guiding a dungeon master, in my opinion, even though they have removed the madness mechanics.
Did you
That
ever
is
use
really
those?
just never used them, and I never have any intention of using them. I know there are a few people who do like them. I always felt that they were unnecessary. If I cannot convince my players that they are doomed by just role playing and describing stuff and just doing silly shite with them,
Mm-hmm.
um, dice rolls aren't going to make it happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't think it was a necessary thing. Mental stress is trying to duplicate the madness
Is
concept
that what that
anyway.
is? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what it's trying to do.
I do like the art on this one too. I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm. We've got firearms are covered. There are 8 modern to futuristic weapons,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no muskets or early firearms. So there were more firearms in the older version. They still have the 7 explosives. In general, that section is the same mostly, but there are some things that are not offered. There's less.
Mm.
I wouldn't say it's a great section. I'm never going to use it anyway. Do you know what I mean? I don't use firearms and explosives in my fantasy D&D
Yeah.
stuff. Do you?
I've used it in 40 some years. I've had one NPC that fired one shot from a firearm, and that was it.
Yeah, we had a pirate campaign not so long ago, about a month or two ago, and we had one pistol in it,
Yeah,
and that was
that's
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
in my whole DM career, one firearm, one shot, and that was it. Yep. So,
yeah,
yeah. But I mean, a lot of people that want them and use them. I mean, especially I think there's a watching Vox Machina on Amazon Prime, the Critical Role series. There's one of the characters that uses a firearm, so people that watch that might want to use a firearm, and here you've got a little bit of guidance for it.
Yeah. The God section is different. I'm not going to say, I'm not sure if it's better or worse,
Okay.
but they have removed some examples of deities and added divine intervention. So I don't really know what to make of the God section. Is it enough to actually help people create their own gods? I'm not convinced. I don't think you would need you would need that many words to explain how to make a god, or deity for your campaign, or your world, or your adventure. I don't think that would be that difficult. Why? Because I do this every two months. I talk about this, and we do this on my channel.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take a lot of time and pages or even words. You wouldn't even need a page. You wouldn't even need half a page. I don't know that they've done what they needed to do here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's underwhelming to me, and it looks like they might give like a little bit. I just think there's so much more you can talk about as far as having clerics and warlocks in your campaign, because the gods are a huge part, and to some extent even paladins and druids, they're a huge part of, or could be a huge part of a cleric. And is there anything about patrons in this, or probably isn't? How to do a patron for a warlock, or
Divine intervention.
Is it under that as well? Yeah.
There's a section on divine intervention and what you might do with that.
Yeah.
That's really about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think I could have used more or something different here to help me. If I have a cleric in my party, how can I make that cleric feel more, in connection with their gods, or, or if they're a warlock and they have a patron, how would I incorporate that? Yeah, I don't like it.
I think divine intervention's trying to do that, but I mean, I think in terms of designing your own gods, I think your name, what are they a god of, and what is their symbol, and then usually, their whatever they are a god of, or their domain, I guess. Like, what is their motivation in the world, in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
And do they operate like the Greek gods, or somebody from Young and the Restless, like an immature sadist or something like that? So it's not a lot of information required. The hazard section has been improved by giving greater detail for some of the older obstacles that were there, and adding a few new threats. I did notice. So,
which one?
So the desecrated ground, the frigid water, the slippery ice, and the thin ice, they have been removed. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a few people say, look, why did you remove thin ice? I'll need that. Or slippery ice, or frigid water, because I like to freeze my player characters in freezing water. Or desecrated ground, probably never going to come up. Unless I guess, maybe it will. But they have included some interesting hazards. Like, we have fireball fungus now.
Yeah, that's
Inferno.
Awesome.
Poisonous gas. Got to have poisonous gas.
Yeah.
I can live without fireball fungus, but got to have poisonous gas. Inferno. Yes, absolutely. At high level, I want to roast my player characters. And then the river Styx was a bit of out of the blue. I wasn't expecting that. The rock slide is a no-brainer. Should have been there. Vicious vines, good idea. Add that in.
Yeah.
Although I think razor vines might have done pretty much the same thing, if you ask me. Was there anything else that stood out for you in the hazards?
For me, I still can't get over the fact, going from old school to 5th edition, that green slime and yellow mold aren't creatures. Because in the old books, those used to be creatures, the green slime and the yellow mold, and the brown mold too. They were a hazard in 2014. It's just like, I remember looking through the monster manual, I was like, where the hell's the green slime at? It's like, there's gray ooze. Where's green slime? Is it not? And then somebody's like, oh, it's a hazard. I'm like, a what? So I like the quicksand pit. I don't know if that was there before or not, but
yeah, it was. Yep. Yeah. I checked. I checked what was added and what was missed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely. Got to have that.
Yeah. I'm a fan of yellow mold and green slime, and I really didn't pay attention to the other ones, so I'll probably come back to this section. I'll probably incorporate a lot of this. I like
Hmm.
I like weird fungus and stuff like that they can find like growing on the walls, and they can mess with it. Is in the Shrieker? Was the Shrieker in here? I don't see Shriekers.
No. I
Or is
think the
that
Shrieker and the
is that a
Violet
monster?
Fungus are actually in the monster manual. It's
Oh,
not
okay.
listed as a hazard.
Okay.
So yeah, so some things did still stay in the monster manual rather than go
Yeah.
into Dungeon Master Guide as a hazard.
Hazard School.
Hazard score, yeah.
Doors with hit points bad.
Yeah. The marks of prestige have
Hmm.
been slimmed down, but mostly improved as far as I can tell. With the old fortifications, so we've still got the old stuff like fortifications, letters of recommendation still there, medals if you want to give them out, parcels of land, special rights, titles for a character, training, and then the new one is special favors.
Hmm.
So I think that was a pretty good improvement on that section.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I skipped right over this one.
Yeah, it's the reason being is it's not really used that much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Oh, I think a lot of people don't use those. It's so much easier to think, oh, magic item and gold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It tends to be, I'm going to give them something, and a mark of prestige tends to get overlooked.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're playing an older version of D&D, then parcels of land and the right to build a fort or a castle or something. There's something you would probably be using.
Yeah. Well, like
Uh,
medals. I mean, I've always just went off with Star Wars Episode 4 at the end. They got a medal. Just
yeah,
like
yeah,
and
yeah.
recognized they had a parade and a medal, and there you go.
Mm. The mob rules are very confusing. I was looking at the mob rules. You have to kind of read through it
Yeah.
and then break down the examples slowly in your head. Because if you just look at the mob rules in those tables, you won't be able to figure it out. You have to then work your way through the examples they give you to understand what's going on. I was thinking about this and like, has this actually saved me time? And I came to the conclusion probably not, because normally I've just taken, if I have 400 zombies and I'm using that bigger mob. So for those of you who are wondering if that's actually a thing I might have done, it is. It was a product of my players saying, we want to know if we can deal with a large number of zombies. And I said, how's 400? And they said, that sounds about right. And many hours later, none of them were dead. They were level 6. And I just took the zombies. How many hit points do they have? I multiplied that by 400. That's how many hit points they had to get through. So they were just,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just a big block of hit points to sort of deal with. And, yeah, the fireballs going off and doing this. Like, yeah, that was just how I dealt with it. Um,
Hmm.
it's all right if you want to do that sort of thing. I don't know. Do you use mob rules at all?
I didn't know they were a thing.
Okay, there we go. It's not something that was important to you then,
No,
obviously.
no. Just like I was already flipping through to see what's next.
Yeah, all right. So creating NPCs, as
Yeah.
you said, you were looking for something next.
Yeah.
NPCs
Hmm.
section
Hmm.
is improved,
Yes.
I think,
Hmm.
and now includes a few tables of names. Well
Mm.
done. We didn't have names before. We do now. Then it directs you to the 2024 Player's Handbook for the personality traits. In that table. I was looking at this and I was like, are you kidding me? I suppose that saves you some space. You don't have to
Yeah.
duplicate the personality table. And if the Dungeon Master Guide is held by a Dungeon Master, they probably have the Player's Handbook as well. So they should have all the bits and pieces they need. But now they need 2 books to make the NPCs.
Yeah.
And then I was looking at the NPC tables on appearance and secrets. It has been much reduced
Mm.
or a little bit reduced, and many of the other tables that were there before have been completely removed. But that being said, a lot of those extra tables that were removed, they weren't very good anyway.
Mm. Yeah.
So we won't fix them. We'll just get rid of them. Um,
Yeah.
Even with explaining what an NPC can be used for, that section is good stuff. It's good. But it's not good enough. I think they needed a bit more of that.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah. I mean, this is just. I mean, this is. I mean, this is even less than bare bones. I mean, the names you could almost print on a DM screen, but um, yeah, something like this would immediately have me going out for looking for something third party to help with NPCs because
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, because it's not enough to make it happen. Poisons. I know you love poisons. The poison section has been reorganized and is generally the same. It
yeah.
now includes specific prices for buying some sample poisons that they give you.
Wow, you
So
can, so they have prices for
yeah,
poisons,
they do.
and I
They put
wonder if they
prices
put
on poisons. That
magic items. I wonder if there's prices on magic items. Poisons, there's about a dozen. We'll price them out.
Yeah, yeah. Magic items, there's 400. We don't want to deal
Yeah,
with that. It's too much. Yeah. The renown system is mostly the same, but
yeah,
now it's all in one place rather than scattered throughout the book, which it was before.
yeah.
Uh, I don't use renown. Do you use renown?
I do in Waterdeep. Yeah, the Dragon
Okay.
Heist campaigns. It's actually mentioned in there, and yeah, you get some cool perks. So if you're running Dragon Heist, I highly recommend using Renowns or factions if you have like factions and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So I'll probably come back and read this again. Actually, I think there's more detail in Dragon Heist, if I'm being honest, than there is here.
Yeah, there will be. Yeah, for those
Yeah,
of you who are wondering if you
yeah,
get enough detail to deal with
yeah,
renowned, no, you probably need to
yeah,
go to a
yeah. So,
different resource.
yeah, I think if you're running an urban campaign or you have factions or something like that, I think renown is really cool. That way, when you need something, you can actually it like puts your foot in the door where you can talk to friends in high places. Once you
Hmm.
get some renown, you can you got a little bit more pull in the city, and I think it's worthwhile there.
Yeah. Um, I haven't used renown since I was running AD&D or
Mm.
advanced, not advanced,
Second,
Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League.
wow,
Since back
wow.
back right, and
Hmm.
that's a long time ago. That's before 2016. The settlement section, the settlements, the section on settlements is mostly superficial tables as far as I can
Yeah.
tell. It doesn't really have enough to get the job done, in my opinion, because it's situated elsewhere, I've discovered, in examples for Greyhawk, the Greyhawk
Hmm.
setting. So it's not, the settlement section looks like it's not enough because you have to go somewhere else to find
Get
the
into the
rest of it.
Greyhawk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I like random tables. I mean, these are fine, but
Yeah. Siege equipment. It includes a few more contraptions that weren't there before,
the keg
but it
launcher.
doesn't. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's not the only one.
Oh
Um,
shoot.
it doesn't explain how to defend against a castle engagement or how to lay siege to a castle. So if you're a dungeon master and trying to run this, here's the gear, but now you've got to figure out how it's all going to work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they didn't explain it. Do you use castle sieges in your adventures? Because I do, but I don't know if you do.
I have not since basic D&D.
There you
That's
go.
that's the last time I've done that. But now if Bastions become a thing, you can bet I'm getting this freaking catapult out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
And,
I
and
don't use these anymore. No.
basic D&D probably did castle sieges fairly
Yeah.
efficiently and simply, right?
Yeah, we
That
had
was
we had we had full sessions of nothing but using the war machine, mass combat,
mm,
tending to our baronies, our counties, our duchies,
mm,
going to war, stuff like that. So yeah,
yeah.
but nowadays, no.
Yeah, I don't know if the Bastions section does enough around sieges to make it work, but supernatural gifts now supernatural gifts covers the blessings and charms. It's all the same. There's nothing extra to say about that, so I skip past that if you ask me.
Okay.
Um, the trap section has expanded each type of trap, as far as I can tell, with some DCs and numbers and a little bit more information with, obviously additional mechanics for different levels of
Yeah.
the trap. So your trap isn't just designed for level 1 to 4 or high
Hmm.
level. They've got a bit of a range.
Yeah.
They did remove the sphere of annihilation.
Oh.
I wonder why. And they didn't add any more traps, and there weren't that many traps in the old Dungeon Master Guide. So there are less traps
Yeah.
now in the new Dungeon Master
Yeah.
Guide.
You know what you could do with these is you could include these back in your building a dungeon section as a table.
Yeah.
You've like randomly determined a trap. Oh wait, no, they didn't include that. That's right.
No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that guidance for making traps probably needs expanding for beginners.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering if if you needed to make your own traps, you're really not going to get enough to be able to
Yeah.
do that. Rather than just use the ones they've provided. And building traps table, the building traps table, I don't know if you've used it before.
That
It's
looks
existed
horrible.
before. The attack bonuses, the saving throws, and the damage
Mm-hmm.
needed to be specific to every character level, like level one,
Mm.
two, three, rather than having a range. And the reason I found this to be the case is because there's too much of a difference between something that is a nuisance or just a setback. It's now called a nuisance, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and what was considered deadly or lethal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between level one and level four, the disparity in terms of how many hit points this thing should be removing is pretty significant. You can't go, oh, this is for level one to four, and this is from level five to nine or 10. It won't help you at all.
Yeah,
Um,
this confuses me just looking at it. Building a trap. Yeah, I think best to look at third party options if you want to start building your own traps. Nord Games, I gotta shout those guys out because Treacherous Traps has a really good random generator. And I just got this deck from them. Look how thick that deck is. That's like,
yeah, pretty
I,
impressive.
yeah. So yeah, build if you want to build your own traps. I'd explore third party content for that.
Or watch
Oh,
your channel
is there a channel
because
that has traps on it?
you have don't you
Puzzles?
have traps?
Oh
You
yeah,
might not
that's
have a
right.
trap book, but
Not yet.
pretty sure there's a trap book coming in the future.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time. I'm teasing you guys. I already know he started his trap book. He just hasn't finished it. But the reality is that they could pick up like,
Yeah.
what is it? Three things they needed to know, and they couldn't write these things down. What is trapped? What is the trigger for the trap?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the effect of the trap?
Yeah.
And then how do you generate ideas? Rory story cubes, or you make some tables.
Some tables.
And you make some tables.
That'd be
You
yeah.
know, that would have been the way. Never mind.
Yeah.
So
There is
sad.
a severe lack of tables in this book. I'm just noticing that as we go on.
Mm.
Yeah.
Tables are not useless. Tables are tools because tables are not
They're a list of
intended.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not intended for you to pick up a 20-sided dice or a percentile dice and just roll randomly. That is not how you use
That's
tables.
how I used to
Not
use them.
not unless you want a gonzo adventure that just does not make sense. You select the thing you want. That's how you use tables.
That's
The numbers are just there so that you people don't forget what stuff is. Oh,
that's how
that's
I
number one.
generated all my dungeons in the old days. Was all random.
Tables, yeah.
You enter a 30 by 30 room. There's a large green dragon in here.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It cannot move around.
Yeah.
And it has a weight issue. um, I found in this chapter, most of the material in this chapter is just repeated from 2014, the Dungeon Master Guide, which is fine. You know, they just at least organized
Yeah.
it so it's easier to find everything because it was all over the place before. Um, the weakest aspect of this is the homebrew guidance. Seriously lacking. Like if you want to homebrew and make your own stuff, it means you need a different product, not this one,
No.
to assist you in making your own stuff. Now, that is, you could say that's not what beginners do. That's what experienced dungeon masters do. Fair enough. But there's still a lot of people who will transition within 3 to 6 months and be making their own stuff. And I hate to say it, you're kind of screwed because there's nothing on homebrewing or making your own classes or subclasses or species or races or feats or, oh, heck, what's that other one? What's that other exploration thingy? The puzzles.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing. There's nothing on puzzles.
To be
Like
fair,
if
I
you want to
don't
make,
help people make their own either.
yeah, yeah. To be fair, making puzzles, as you've
Yeah.
explained to me in the past, is actually quite difficult.
Yeah.
So explaining it Oh, hang on.
Well, I guess there is a
This one,
page in the back.
this actually explains it in one page, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, one page is all
Yeah,
I
right.
need.
Yeah, yeah. So, so, yeah,
Yeah,
you're kind of screwed. I think this is the one of the biggest issues with this book is there's not enough guidance on making your own stuff.
yeah,
Possibly because they felt like that was more advanced Dungeon Master stuff. But like I said, I feel like a lot of Dungeon Masters, they're already making their stuff within 3 to 6 months, and within a year, you know, this chapter will get used more than any other chapter, obviously.
yeah,
I think it'll get used a lot. Um, but it could have been better.
yeah.
Could have another chapter called Homebrewing. Maybe that'll work.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Chapter 4, Creating Adventures. Was there anything else you wanted to say about chapter 3?
No, I'm ready to go. Put that behind me now. I'm looking at
Yeah,
chapter
let's do
4
that.
already, and the sadness.
The sadness starts to set in.
Yeah.
It's a little upsetting. Not everything, by the way, people.
No.
Creating adventures. Much better job at explaining and offering tools to make your own adventures
Mm,
in the new Dungeon Master Guide, in my opinion. I think they have actually thought about it very carefully, and Chris Perkins and James White are actually pretty good at making adventures. It's not that they will necessarily be publishing great adventures, but before they go through the editing and the page restriction process, those adventures are probably pretty good. They have a 4-step process for creating uh, an adventure, which doesn't resemble anything that Chris Perkins has ever done. Chris Perkins doesn't talk about the one-page format. There's no NPC stuff talked about, the maps, locations, none of that's there, which is really strange. So I kind of wonder, is this 4-step process James Wyatt's process, or Chris Perkins put his process in and decided to cut out about half of it? It's a
yeah.
little odd.
Uh,
Yeah. What else was there here? The adventure section by level or tier
mm-hmm.
is actually pretty good. I feel like they had some tables there explaining what the characters can
Yeah.
do at specific levels and providing some reasonable tables for adventure ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Could those tables be bigger? Absolutely. The only thing that I had a little problem with was the tier 1 and tier 2. They're not really clearly explained as to what your characters are doing at that level. Whereas
Mm,
tier 3 and 4 is really clear. You know exactly what's going on.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, what was the other thing I needed to say? The map section on the adventures is pretty primitive, but it does actually have a map symbol ledger this time. It didn't have it before.
See, this was always with the dungeons when in the older books. I was just like, okay, yeah, they got maps there. These are all like ones I would use when I create my dungeon, and it's in.
Well, they didn't even have a ledger last time. They didn't even have the
Then
symbols
no,
for
yeah.
building dungeons and
Wait a
doing
minute.
your own maps. Didn't even
Wait a
exist in
minute.
the older Dungeon
Okay,
Master Guide.
I don't know if you guys at home can see this. Here, let me pull this. Let me pull this up. Where are we at? Adventure setting. Plan encounters, no adventure setting. So what we're talking about right here is those are the map symbols. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is my book. On the inside cover of this book are the same symbols
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
40 years ago.
That's what happens when you don't your design team just don't have enough time to get the book together. But this time it's there. Good news. The 3 types of adventure hooks are all right in my opinion. Like how you hook them. There's like D6 tables.
Yeah.
So 3 different tables: patron, supernatural, and happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were decent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only 6,
The
but okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could do more for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The character objectives are sensible to include, so players can personalize their goals. I thought that was a good inclusion. Um, and then I really liked the combat encounter features or challenges that they discussed, like different elevations,
Oh
different
yeah.
defensive positions,
Mm-hmm.
hazards that you can include, mixing monster groups, threats that force movement, and hazards also means traps. People you can put traps in with your
Yeah.
your combat. So that was decent stuff. And
Yeah.
here's your favorite bits that you were wanting to talk about before,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the encounter building budget system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
or
I'm,
gold.
I'm curious as to what your thoughts on that, because like we said, the adventuring day is gone, but
Yeah.
they have this in here, and I've been playing around with it with some of my own monsters that I've created, and I'm almost thinking that my monsters need to be stronger.
Yeah. So the problem with encounter building budget systems
Mm-hmm.
is they're not new. The encounter building budget system existed in 2024,
But there's a few differences.
2014, the older one. It's now on the new one, so they just carried it on. It is simpler than the older one, the
Mm-hmm.
original Dungeon Master Guide for 2014, but it was taken from D&D 4e and older versions of D&D. I think even 3.5 or version 3.
Mm-hmm.
It is a product of Wizards of the Coast. TSR never really did this.
Mm.
Um, it is definitely just modified from the older one, but I doubt that it's accurate or even worthwhile pursuing
Mm.
because it never worked for Dungeons and Dragons 4e or version 3, and it probably has not been fully tested.
That I don't know.
So there's always people, I don't know, part of our community always feel like they have to have a mathematical formula
Mm-hmm.
or some sort of maths that explains how to do stuff rather than, I hate to say it, you're going to have to just consider this as an art or trial by error or fire.
Yeah,
And
experience.
unfortunately, yeah, an experience. Because unfortunately, every group is different
Mm-hmm.
because everybody's skill level is different and everybody's level of smarts is different and everybody's level of stupidity is different. So, and then you've got 20-sided dice rolls, which really
Yeah,
make it hard for anything to work
yeah.
mathematically.
Yeah, a couple failed
And
saves and your encounter can go from low to high. I mean
yeah,
it's just
yeah. And your dice that you purchased are not random.
mm,
Because the manufacturer who made your dice did not make them very well. So the chances are that none of your dice roll the way they should be rolling. And yeah, so they're not scientifically designed. Heck, even the shape of some of the dice aren't going to be perfectly random. Um, there's troubleshooting advice though on
oh,
encounter building for
but
combat encounter building, and
before
I
we
thought
go
that was
on from that, as far as
yeah,
the XP budget thing,
yeah,
I'm going to give it a try because there is definitely a power creep with the new characters in 2024, the Player's Handbook, and like I said, I've got a few of my homebrew monsters that I've already used against people or against characters that got wiped. I mean, they didn't stand a chance. And then I go and I use this XP budget, and they like some of them didn't even meet the low. So what I would probably, while this isn't probably accurate, I think it's a good starting point. So if you're first time
yeah,
trying to figure out how you want to make your encounters, if you just want it, like a low nuisance, if you want to make it a moderate, or if you want to make it a very difficult battle, I think if you start with this, especially with the new players, with the new characters, the 2024 characters, which I believe arguably are going to be a lot stronger than 2014 characters, or if you're an experienced DM and you kind of want to see, especially when the new monster manual comes out, if you kind of want to see, use this and kind of see where you're at and see if those experience points come in. It's going to differ from monsters too, because, a lot of, I don't remember what the intellect devourer is, but can be a very difficult monster to fill
mm,
in some of these experience points compared to something like a bugbear or a hobgoblin or whatever else. I mean, something of equal challenge rating. So, well, yeah, I totally agree. This probably isn't accurate. I don't think it's too bad of a place to start as you start to get your DM wings and start to
mm,
learn. Because, like you said, I think the best way to do this is from experience, from trial and error. The more you become a DM, the more you're going to know how to build a combat encounter. You're going to know what type of monsters you should be able to put in that combat encounter. Not only that, but you're going to learn as you become more experienced how to adjust your encounters after they've already started. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And this table is much, the XP budgets are much higher than they were before.
Yeah.
There's, at the lower end, they didn't change it too much, but at the top end, it's changed a lot because it needed to. Like if you go right up to level
Power creep.
20, the budget is like double. It is like double.
Cool.
And it needed to be because, yeah. Um, so yeah, but they had some great troubleshooting advice on
Yeah.
encounter building as well.
Yeah. Agreed.
Monster behavior and combat tactics. What do you know? We get some guidance. Welcome addition to a Dungeon Master Guide. Actually gives you a little bit of discussion about how you can do this. It doesn't explain like every individual monster and how you would role play them and how they would fight, but they do at least give you some different tactics that you could incorporate into whatever monster you think would be suitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really read
Pacing.
through this one, but this one's bookmarked. I'll probably come through here, especially for creating monsters, being able to get a little bit more help with tactics and behavior is always nice.
Yeah, exactly. Pace, tension, urgency, resting, all good advice. They talk about how to do that. They even have a table of 10 different adventure climaxes that you could use, the suggestions to the dungeon master in terms of finishing off an adventure or maybe a campaign. Pretty solid stuff. I don't think any of that's bad at all.
Yeah, I think this is good stuff. I mean, this could almost be in the earlier chapters, with as far as
Could be. The adventure rewards section is super simple for individual and horde treasure. I am quite happy because it was a pain to between level 1 and 4 I now roll a percentile dice, and I don't know, they could get a bunch of electrum or a bunch of platinum or a bunch of copper coins, and like it was all over the place. I just tell me roughly how much they should have at the top end. That's all I really need to know.
electrum in here. What happened to their electrum?
They removed it. That's the thing. That's the good thing. It's like instead of it being a range, it didn't need to be a table like that. I think the new table is actually smarter. I like that a lot more.
Yeah.
And then the standout feature is Chris Perkins, James White. I don't know who it is, but they provide 5 example adventures on 1 page or less in a format for normal dungeon masters writing for their own games, not for a published product. I think it was awesome, but not quite enough to be useful at first glance until you realize that those notes are not written for you. They are a shorthand for whoever wrote them, who's going to be understanding them and using them. What they point out is that when you write an adventure, you write them in shorthand. Those are the notes that would work for Chris Perkins or James Wyatt, not for you or me. And so don't think you can just pick those 5 example adventures up and just run them, because that's not how it works. They're just examples of how Chris or James would write up their notes for their adventure.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, because I was like all down on this part because I was expecting, again, to go back to my very first Dungeon Master guide, my Dungeon Master rulebook. There's an adventure in here that we ran on the Game Master Roundtable, the Kill Bargle episode, and the very first, that was my very first adventure that I ran in my DM career, was in here. And I was expecting that because somebody said there's adventure examples in the book, and so I was looking all over for them, and I came across these pages like, well, that's not it. And I was flipping through this book like mad. I was like, where is the adventure that we could run? So I kind of, I mean, this is fine to look at, but I would have loved to have seen, even if it's just like the infamous 5-room dungeon or something, something that I could run, because in here it's titled Your First Adventure. And so as a new dungeon master in the Dungeon Master Guide, I would have loved there to have been one small adventure that I could open up and run it after I've read the previous 4 chapters.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people were thinking.
Yeah.
And my response was the same as yours when I first saw it, Wally.
Hmm.
And then I suddenly it just clicked because as you know, I have to write an adventure every single week because I'm a
Hmm.
crazy person with no understanding of time. Um, and I put one up on Patreon every single week, and I realized it wasn't written for publication. It wasn't written to be run by you or me or anybody else. It is just the notation that would be used by James and Chris
Hmm.
based on how their brain works. So there's a whole lot of unsaid stuff in those notes that they probably know about that they don't think they need to write down. It is just an example of the shorthand that you might use when you're writing your adventure.
Yeah.
And as soon as you understand that, then you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm
I
still
don't know that
bummed.
they needed. I don't know that they needed to have five, but
Yeah.
at least they give you a spread to show you different levels of play with
Yeah.
it, I guess.
I would have liked to have
But
seen a small adventure in here. I'm still bummed about
yeah.
this. I did notice too here under the first one, the fouled stream at the entrance, there is in bold letters Shrieker fungus.
Oh, are we going to get that in the monster manual?
So it must be coming in the monster manual then, because we did not see it in hazards, but right here it says entrance, a Shrieker fungus just inside the cave. Entrance alerts the inhabitants.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. Wow, they really have thought this out.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Let's move on to chapter 5, shall we?
Yeah, we should.
Creating campaigns. Thank God my notes are a lot shorter for this one. Um, there are steps for designing a campaign. I don't agree with the excessive planning that is suggested with a campaign, but that is only because I've ran so many campaigns and had so many campaigns not make it all the way to the end,
Mm-hmm.
or found that whatever plans that I had in mind just did not work out for a variety of different reasons. Using a journal and keeping notes is really good advice because
Yeah.
I've made that mistake before. Types of campaigns, as discussed, even provides a few short examples. They advertise the Wizards of the Coast published campaign books that are listed. Well done. You've plugged your product again. Well done. That's the way to go. Create your campaign in 5 steps, which is reasonable. Not perfect, but reasonable. Name, factions, magic, mysteries, landmarks. I feel like mysteries and landmarks is the same thing, if you ask me.
Mm.
Deities. Yeah, okay. There might be a few other things you could add in there, but that's not so bad. You know, the basic premise.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Um, it's I'm not very good at uh running a campaign outside of a pre-published. I kind of just see to the pants as we go kind of a thing.
Mm,
So I like the trackers and I can get some ideas of what to keep in my notes. But as far as when I am running a campaign, I usually keep it everything in a Google Doc, just because I can bring it up on my phone. I've got it, I've got easy access to it. So there's a few interesting things here that I would probably transfer over to a Google Doc that it's like, yeah, I should probably keep track of that, but I don't know.
yeah.
I'm sure this is very helpful to somebody, and I might come back and read it at some point. But
The problem is that for somebody who's never done it before, it might be useful to them.
yeah,
But you're never,
yeah,
even if you've never done it before, you're probably only going to use it once.
yeah,
This section. This is
yeah,
the big issue with this section, and a lot of these sections actually is like you may only ever use them once because there's not enough tools to warrant going back to it again.
yeah.
Um, Session zero section is smart. They actually do talk about session zero in
Mm-hmm.
terms of character building or building characters together, not separately in your room, sitting on your bed with some junk food or whatever it is, or a coffee. Um, Connecting the characters together, they actually go over that. They talk about a starting location, your first adventure, planning out adventures and sort of like a cycle
Mm-hmm.
potentially, and ending the campaign. So um,
Yeah,
it's interesting that they have included so many of those things in their session zero. It's a lot.
yeah.
I just did a session zero, and I think the extent of what I covered was build the characters together, connect them, starting location, I told them to tell me what the name of the villages that they came from, and then I had a starting adventure, and I really didn't plan out everything. I asked them what sort of things they would like to do. I didn't indicate what the end of the campaign would be,
Hmm.
um, because I'm sure that will change because it always does. It was always good to have it up something to aim for, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
we usually aim for be like, okay, this is the I see us. This is probably going to take us to level 5 or level 6, and that's probably where
yeah,
we're going to start wrapping up. So that way, when they get to level 3, level 4, like, okay, we're probably getting close, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, I gave you extra levels. We're probably going to go to level 8.
yeah.
um, I do like to bring in the party together. I think that's something that really needs emphasized, because that can be wonky if you don't do that together. How do you all know each other, stuff like that? um, and like you said, everybody building your characters together. So maybe you have a couple that tie in together. Maybe a couple of you are
Mm,
siblings, or if you're both clerics, maybe yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's some good stuff to read through.
yeah. Uh, I think the problem too is that a lot of people build campaigns slightly differently too.
Yeah,
There's a couple of different ways you can do it.
yeah.
Um, the break sessions or episodes is a nice change to see. They like to talk about bastions or
Mm-hmm.
strongholds, I guess, carnival sessions or episodes,
Yeah.
comedy creatures, missing
Mm-hmm.
pets, shopping. I don't think we need to talk about the shopping one because I think everybody is, is aware of the shopping one. Special events,
Yeah.
going on a vacation, which I thought it was amusing. Um, and then they take three conflicts that can take place in a campaign like Greyhawk, and they pull it apart as examples, like
Mm-hmm.
how would you, you know, how to do it for different character levels, like the chromatic orb, the chromatic dragons, the elemental evil cultists, Ooze and his followers. There's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at all of that, um, they've done a decent job, I felt, in terms of campaign. Certainly better than the older Dungeon Master Guide. And
Yeah.
and the majority of the Greyhawk setting has good examples until you unfortunately get to the Gazetteer, in my opinion. The Gazetteer section that may or may not offer enough to use as a world. And the problem is, I don't think they needed to give you the entire world as an example. We could take just a piece of Greyhawk
Mm-hmm.
and use it as an example because it's 30 pages. It's a lot of material.
So are we on the Greyhawk now then?
We
Um,
are onto Greyhawk, man.
okay. Um,
T-
you know,
Do you use Greyhawk, man?
I
Have you ever used it?
No, I've ran one adventure that's set in Greyhawk, which is against the Cold or the Reptile God. And it's set there, but I didn't even know. I had to Google where Orlane was, and I was like, oh, it's in Greyhawk. I'm like, okay. um, so I'm gonna put my 12-year-old hat back on when I first started learning. I would have loved this at 12 years old. Um, I thought this would have been the neatest thing. I probably would have built around it as far as that goes. The fact that they have all the gods listed there, I was excited to see. Um, they've got the days of the week. I would have adopted that terminology. The maps I would have been really interested in. The city locations. I thought that was, that the neighborhoods, the locations. um, I mean, I can understand why a lot of people are like, yeah, there's 30 pages in there, but there's other sections of this book that I would cut out before I would cut out Greyhawk. Because I just, for me now, this doesn't mean much. I might read through it just to, you can always get ideas from reading stuff. It always generates ideas for me. I mean, no matter, like, oh, I don't need to read this. I already know, and then I can read it. Like, that gives me an idea. And that's what this will do. But if I was a brand new DM, I would probably appreciate this section. Just, I don't know. I'm just weird that way. And to have that already done, would probably soak me in. It's the chapter after this that I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah, this is gonna be painful, that one. Yeah, I found that the gods of Greyhawk don't actually include what the god they are a god of,
They
or their
don't.
motivate. The table is really simple and clear.
Oh, they
For the
don't.
gods of Greyhawk, they don't include what they are a god of.
That's got to be an
That's it.
oversight, don't you think?
It's got to be. I'm like, gods, name a god, what they are a god of, and their symbol is
That's
the
not on
most
there.
key things. Key, and it's not there. Including the Greyhawk setting offers an example of world building. Absolutely. And it is better than trying to explain world building
Yeah.
only and not giving an example. But it should have been a separate book, in my opinion, for Greyhawk. And the reason being is that even though I have run old adventures that are traditionally set in Greyhawk, I never really used Greyhawk.
Mm.
You've used it once.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people now aren't going to use this
No.
section. If it had been the Forgotten Realms, it would have been kind of unnecessary because
There's so
there's
much.
so much of it already.
Yeah.
Um, I just thought that we don't have to include an entire campaign world in the book. We just need to give them an example of how you do it, and it should be about like making your own stuff,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Um,
They should have
because
used.
even a beginner dungeon master is probably not going to use Greyhawk. Most of them are probably thinking, "What the heck is Greyhawk?" I remember in is that where Baldur's Gate is? Is that Baldur's Gate in Greyhawk?
Yeah, I see that.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's,
That'll
it's
definitely if they pick out the player's handbook, the DM guide, and then they bring up something that's Avernus or whatever that's set in Forgotten Realms. Yeah, I can see what that would be confusing.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, a lot of the stuff on creating campaigns is actually pretty solid. I actually
yeah,
was really impressed. It's just when we get to the Greyhawk Gazetta section, I think that was you don't have to provide the whole thing. You know, republishing and rewriting something that existed in the past and sticking here was a mistake in my opinion. Um,
oh.
that's all I have to say about the campaign section.
Shout out to RPG Grandma. Thanks for joining us. Uh,
Mm.
RPG Grandma says PCs become tourist guides in Greyhawk. It could work. And they've got that info around here. We used to play in Greyhawk when we were kids. Well, that's cool.
Mm.
Very,
Mm.
very, very good.
Yeah, yeah. People using Greyhawk or who are going to use Greyhawk are going to buy a Greyhawk book
Yeah,
because it's
yeah. I
yeah.
think if they wanted, I still like that it's included here. Again, if I was
Mm.
reading the learning to Dungeon Master for the first time, I probably would have nerded out on this section. I would have been
Mm.
like, I'm supposed to learn how to be a DM, but I'm going to read about this city and stuff like that. One of the things that I do want to point out though is, did you
Mm.
know that the Tomb of Horrors?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
It's in there. Yeah, all of those key locations that people
Yeah,
might be aware of have been they usually come from Greyhawk.
yeah. The Tomb of
Greyhawk is a
Horrors.
much better example of building a world than the Forgotten Realms.
It
I hate to
lies.
say it
Yeah.
because it's got more conflict
Hmm.
and more things that it's not densely packed. It doesn't feel like Metropolis. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. It's not Superman going to Metropolis. It's Superman going through Kansas.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Found it.
Yeah.
The Tomb of Horrors lies deep within the vast swamp, is what it says.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
still
White
can't
Plume
believe they did
Mountain will be there. A whole bunch of them will be there. I'm
that.
sure of it.
I
As
still
part of their
can't
map.
believe they did that on the deities. What a bummer. You've got the 2014 book handy. Oh, that doesn't have the deities in it. That's in the player's handbook. Never mind. Okay.
No. There are more deities in the player's handbook than the Dungeon Master Guide, the old one.
Okay.
But there was a table
It showed what
on
they're.
deities, and it broke it down into the name of the deity, what they are a god of or
Yeah.
goddess of, and their symbol.
Yeah.
And that table is gone.
And instead,
So
it shows what world or universe they're from, which is our next section.
okay, Can I just spit out my feedback and then let you do your
Yeah.
feedback
Yeah,
because
my
I just want
feedback's
to
like 2 sentences.
I want to vomit this one. Okay, chapter 6, Cosmology. The planar adventure section table is good stuff. A good idea in my opinion. Could have been larger. Would have preferred it to be. The cosmology is really, in my opinion, for high-level games. Many people use a multiverse that they make of their own, and they don't even use Wizards of the Coast cosmology. You don't need a lot of detail to use your own multiverse, in my experience. I have run many cosmic campaigns that go across the multiverse, and I've never used Wizards of the Coast material because I could not be stuffed reading any of their
Yeah.
stuff.
Mm.
I would use a sentence describing the world or plane or location that they had gone to,
Yep.
pretty much like what you would do if you were going to Star Wars, a planet or environment in Star Wars. Oh, this is the ice world or plane. This is the fire plane. You don't need a lot to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of ideas for places to have adventures in Wizard of the Coast Cosmology are really surface level as far as I could tell.
Hmm.
And I think the inclusion of the official multiverse information is a waste of space because
Yeah.
very few people will ever use it.
Yeah.
I have run cosmic adventures, and I don't use their stuff. Most people never get to beyond level 10, so they're probably not going multiverse cosmic anyway.
Mm.
And do you use it? Do you use cosmology, the Wizards of the Coast cosmology,
Um,
Ollie?
I use the inner planes. I use the Shadow Dark, the Feywild, the Ethereal. That's it, though. I mean, those are the only ones, and those are just recently. We've just
Yeah.
recently went to the Feywild, and just recently. But you know what? I did those in. They were in published books, so I have everything I need to know about the little section of the Shadow Dark we're going to in my Vecna game. It's in the Vecna book, and that's I didn't. I was like, okay, this is where we're at. We're in the Shadow Dark. It looks like this. This needs to be its own book if people want to know about the cosmology, just like they did in AD&D. I forgot what it was, something Manual of the Planes or something.
Yeah.
This is. I imagine this part is probably geared towards more just being informational and maybe the more experienced players, but yeah.
And ensure that ensure the copyright for Wizard of the Coast is not expired because they haven't printed it for a while, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But yeah, this
Keep
is
renewing that
yeah,
IP.
and where's Theros? Theros isn't in here.
It's all right. You just use ancient Greece. That's basically it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree.
This is yeah. They could have done something else with those pages. I don't like that part. But.
Look, just include a picture of your cosmology, like a diagram, like I did, and one page, one sentence for each world within that thing. And that's one page. There's 2 pages. You're done. Move on.
Yeah.
And that's your example. And maybe explain how you do it. But that's really all you need. All this other stuff was just it's never going to get used. Never going to get used.
Yeah, and the adventures, they print what you need. Like Wild Beyond the Witchlight is, you go to the Feywild. Everything you need for the Feywild is in that adventure module. In Vecna, you go to the Shadowfell. Everything that you need to run that portion of the adventure for the Shadowfell is right there. So,
yeah. Well, now we get on to chapter 7, which is a huge section, and I want to just I just want to regurgitate everything as fast as I can, and then you say, does that sound all right? I've got a little bit more to say about this section, but I'm just going to regurgitate. Okay. Treasure section for me. Traditionally, quite often the section that most dungeon masters use more than anything else, not because that's what they wanted there, but because it just happens that way. I like the art objects table and how many they offer at different values, the different values and so forth. Helps when you get stuck for ideas to have a table like that. Great. Awesome. My favorite magic item is Baba Yaga's dancing broom. Many of those magic items have a generic concept connected to ammunition, weapons, and armor. Great idea. Okay, so we have a flame, whatever you want it is. Doesn't have to be a flame sword, it could be a flamed axe. Good idea. There are many magic items in here that have been reprinted. A small collection that are new. The magic items from the characters that were involved in the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon back in the day, the TV series, are now included. Smart idea, like that. There's a lot more common magic items that have been ported over from Xanathar's Guide. Good idea too. Should be there. The concept of magic items being optional has been dropped. We now just established that they part of the game. which was always silly because you were never going to convince the community that they should be optional because they felt like they were an aspect of you find them and they're optional. Now it's part of the game, but it does have some maths has been factored into it in some way. It's unlikely and impossible that this will work, the maths behind it, but, good luck trying. Magic items don't have a specific price. You were mentioning it before, and it's probably going to annoy a few people because people wanted a specific price for a particular magic item, and I suspect the design team has done that because they didn't want to encourage magic shops, even though they do talk about having magic shops in a game. They just didn't want to go back to version 3 or version 3.5 of D&D where magic shops were just crazy. Um, and at least the magic items prices do give you a set rarity, and then you take the price for that rarity and you multiply, or you add on the price of the type of weapon or armor it is, rather than being a range. Like, okay, you're dealing with a common magic item, it could be a range of this price to this price. It's like 500 to a 5,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
You just got a price, and then you just add on whether it's weapon or armor or, I don't know, a suitcase or something like that. You now get guidance on how to make magic items, how many magic items to award to a character at different levels, which I suspect is not accurate. And although it's trying to rely on a mathematical formula, it's probably not something you should rely on. So be careful. The magic items tables don't seem that useful. There's the tables where you randomly determine what you're going to get in your treasure pile compared to just selecting what you need as a dungeon master. I think that's probably the most sensible thing for a dungeon master to do. And the categories of magic items didn't need to take up so much space. Like, cool blowing, did they spend a bit of time on that? And that is all I have to say about those.
You know, I don't know if I really have anything to say. I like the art.
Yeah.
I've always
Yeah.
been a fan of the magic item section, the treasure section in the original book, and they've just pretty much duplicated most of that, added some stuff,
Yeah.
and we're good.
Yeah.
So probably the as a dungeon master, probably one of your chapters that you will use quite frequently. You'll probably use it
You
the
will.
most. Yeah. So yeah, love it. I love treasure. I love magic items. Yes. Good. I was looking for Bobby's Club, but I didn't see it anywhere, but I could be wrong.
It is there. Yeah, I think it's Thunder. It's something Mall
Oh,
of Thunder or the
I'll,
Club of Thunder or something. Yeah, I can't
I'll have to
remember
spend more
exactly.
time. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, love it.
Chapter 8, Bastions.
Hmm.
What did you think of the Bastions section?
Oh, boy. Okay. uh, it's a neat idea. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to think of it.
Do you use strongholds or bastions in your game?
No, in my Vecna game, to start Vecna off, each of the characters got a house on Blue Lake or whatever the name of it is in Neverwinter, and I went into my map making program and I drew them a house and I gave that to them. I was like, here you go, you have an empty house. This seems like a lot of work.
Doesn't it?
My gosh, this seems like so much. I don't, I just don't, I might look through here to get garnish ideas, but I don't think I'm going to go Bastions at all. No.
Yeah. And here's the problem, and this is what I suspect, because I unlike Wally, I use strongholds and I guess castles and bastions and towers and home bases and so forth a lot. It's quite a common thing in my campaigns because my campaigns usually run from about level 1 to 16 and go up as high as level 20.
Mm-hmm.
And usually by about level 8 or 9, they've got some sort of home base. And so I use that sort of stuff all the time. But they've kind of got out a little bit out of hand. It's wonderful to see that there's more information on strongholds, castles, mage towers, and player characters' home base. That's great. Bastions as a system is not really flexible enough, in my opinion, for a campaign or adventure and the pace that you might be setting. or what different groups might want. It's kind of locked in, you know, so you'd have to make some adjustments to it for it to work. There's not enough discussion around the mobile bastion or stronghold or home base, which needs more coverage, like spelljammer ships, where you can't keep going back to a castle or a home base like that. It has to come with you. Sailing ships, submarines, airships, heck, even a large land vehicle like a wagon or a battle wagon or something like that, or I don't know, a moving town. Um, Bastions and strongholds in the game aren't for everybody. They're not for everyone. I think it's better for high level play in games beyond level 10, in my opinion. And I've done this a lot, but I have done it sooner. Like I have had Bastions come up at about level 5. I think the reason they've aimed for level 5 is because they know that most people finish their games by level 10, right? Yeah. And players um, have to look after their Bastion is how I would do it. But it's still optional for a dungeon master to include it, which is sensible.
Yeah.
Um, as this is how it should be. This is how I've done it. I'm sure a lot of people do that way as well. I know there are dungeon masters who like to control everything, including the stronghold or bastion. That's all right. Um, that's how I've done it in the past. I decide whether there are going to be bastions or strongholds. The players look after it, and I just keep a very cursory, supervisory look over what's going on.
Yeah.
I think the Bastion system has a lot of maths that was stripped out, but I think it should have taken more out to make it easier to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I remove a lot of detail. I literally require one paragraph to run a Bastion. That's how much information I need. Everything in 2014 was enough to get the job done. The only person that found that it wasn't enough was one player who happens to be a quantity surveyor in my group.
Oh boy.
Okay. So unless you're a quantity surveyor and you
Yeah,
really
I can
need to
see that.
break down the cost of every wall and every building and so forth and count up, nobody gives a shit usually.
Yeah.
So bad idea to go into that level of detail. I guess at least it's there, but I would probably expect better to ignore it.
Yeah.
Special facilities per character, too much. They get too many special facilities per character. And when you consider based on their level and the combination of every party member getting these special facilities, there's going to be a lot. Most of the special facilities in a Bastion are mechanical benefits rather than a narrative driven for the campaign or the adventure as a resource. So that they're going to give you a lot more extra stuff. You thought your characters were going to be stronger and better and more improved, like the Bionic Man. Well, guess what? Bastion included, it's going to be a lot more. Downtime activities have been removed, replaced with Bastions. I think that's a shame. I still felt like a lot of the downtime stuff was, useful. And I think what has happened here is that the Bastions are there to try to convince players to buy the Dungeon Master Guide, but that's not the only reason.
For higher
I think
level
it's
play, do you think?
I think it needed to be here. I don't think a lot of people are saying it should be in the player's handbook. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just another reason why you might want to buy it if you're a player to have the Bastion system at your
Yeah.
hand, at your fingertips. And I'm sure the Hasbro marketing team said you need to put it in the Dungeon Master Guide. But I think the reality is that you could never have this system in the player's handbook because as soon as you put it in the player's handbook, the players expect that
To be
they
able
can
to
always
do
use
it.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a mistake. So, yeah, my suggestion is take the Bastion system,
Mm-hmm.
rip its guts out, strip it for parts, and dump as much as you can so that you don't explode and your players suddenly lose their mind. Because unless you have people who really want their level of complexity,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where's so do these cost anything? I'm not seeing a
Yeah,
cost.
there's costs and time frames and so forth. They've got all of that there. There's
Do
lots
they?
of that
I'm not even
information.
seeing
It's
that.
broken down into a modular system, which is a
Oh,
sensible thing to do. It's just
yeah.
it's probably too it's too granular.
I
It's a bit too granular.
I don't know. If I were to do something like this, if the characters were interested in, like, if they wanted like a library, I mean, you could more make it like a almost like a shop generator where you're like generating stuff for making a town or whatever. If like, hey, I want to build a small library or whatever else, just give me how much it costs. You know, I don't know. This is too much for me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't
It
know.
makes your brain hurt, eh?
Yeah, yeah, it really
Does.
does. And I just, you know, and I've been thinking about this. This is like the chapter that I've been like thinking about since we decided to do this. I'm just like, I just don't know what to think of it. It's just, I don't know. I mean,
Somebody asked me if I would do a video on showing them how to build a bastion,
mm-hmm,
and I said, not a chance. And there's a reason, because I would never go to that level of detail with a
yeah,
bastion.
yeah,
And I know what players can handle, and what what I want them to get from it,
mm-hmm,
and this is too much.
yeah.
Um,
The way, so like some of the stuff we do, like my in my home game, um, like my brother, his character got some property in Waterdeep. He actually has two things, like the old windmill in the South Ward. He's turned into a schoolhouse, and then there was a place up in the Castle Ward that he got for doing a quest. That he turned into like a temple. He calls it his temple inn. Um, Mainly what I like to do with those is give him a piece of graph paper and just let him go nuts. And he likes to design his own and build his walls and his rooms. And it's like, this is here, this is here. And I go, yep, 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 yep. Okay, it's going to cost you 12,000 gold pieces for this. It's going to cost you this for this. And it's a gold piece dump. But not only that, but you can also use it for story hooks and stuff. So, you know, be like,
mhm.
okay, you know, there's one of the students at your schoolhouse. His parents are pissed, you know, and they come down to meet you, and there's something weird, you know. You could so not only so there's like a things that come out of that is number one, it allows the players to kind of be like the dungeon master of their own little properties. They get to create and use graph paper and design and find and build stuff. Number two, it's a gold piece dump. So now, like, okay, that's going to cost you 50,000 gold pieces to put on to build this library. Well, I only have 40. Well, it looks like you're going to have to adventure a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, gold's important. And then the DM part of it. Yeah, that library that you built or you opened. Yeah, there's a book in there and it was stolen or something, you know. So,
Well, and also too, they can start the process of the building, because it can take so long anyway
yeah,
to build it.
yeah,
So you can get started, but you're going to have to save up the rest of it to finish the job. And I've
yeah,
done that in my campaigns. Everything you just said is exactly what I have done as
yeah,
well.
yeah. That's,
Like,
mm-hmm,
if a quantity surveyor wants to break everything down, I always said to him, "This is how much it costs us, how long it takes." And he said, "Where do I get the labor from?" And I said, "Okay, you decide. You can go to a city and hire them." And said, "Do I
mm-hmm,
have to be involved?" Well, do you know how to build a castle? Then no. Okay. Do you know how to rebuild manor? No. Okay. Then you're not the person for that. You just hire somebody, and somebody else does the work.
yeah,
While you're away adventuring and while you're having your downtime, your stuff is getting built, and
yeah,
I will let you know when that time is expired, and I'll let you know if you run out of money and you still need to pay a bit another down deposit
yeah,
on your building, or
yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Cool.
Okay,
Yeah,
we are to the appendix,
yeah.
man.
The lore
These are
glossaries.
short sections, mate. So
Mm-hmm,
we'll be all right.
mm-hmm.
Appendix A, the law glossary.
Right.
God,
Love
what
it.
was your opinion
I
of
like it.
this?
I like this. You know, yeah, you can Google the stuff. You can look on your thing and stuff, but um, this is like a little time capsule of history. And
Hmm.
I like that a lot of the. I don't know if you're gonna agree with me on it or not, but yeah, just I don't know. There's a few characters and places in here that are iconic, and I'm glad they kind of just put them all together here for a little time capsule, a little short introduction. Yeah, I'm totally cool with this.
Will you reuse it?
I won't reuse it, but I will read it, and I'm a history buff anyway, so I'll
Well,
go through and read it, and
read it
yeah,
once.
probably read it once, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that'll be it.
yeah, probably.
So I think the glossary, in my opinion, is a bit pointless. is it's really only for new people, and it will be referenced at best once, even for new people. And if you're an experienced person, you may not even read through it, or you'll just wind up reading stuff you already know, right?
Yeah.
I understand what they were trying to achieve here. I didn't learn. I did learn some new D&D lore from reading this section.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I did, but I didn't care that I had learned something new about it. I really
Did
didn't give a shite.
did
I
you like
suspect.
history class, Fred? Did you like
I
history
do.
class
I
as well?
like
Do you?
history, but here's the thing. I suspect many people will not need this section at all. It just
Oh
won't.
yeah.
Even if we're dealing
This
with new
is
people, it's just not necessary. And the problem is the process of collecting information and knowledge and lore about D&D is the product of playing the game and playing through the published adventures and playing in the worlds that have been published and put out
yeah.
and dealing with the monsters, right? And adventures and world campaign guides, all that sort of stuff. You don't have to be exposed to all of it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of that process if you're just collecting it.
Yeah.
Just because I've played a long time and I've played a lot of the older stuff, just as you have,
Mm-hmm.
that's just your experience of D&D. And it is all right to start off just like you and I did with nothing.
Yeah.
It is all right to not know all this stuff. You don't need to know it. When somebody says a Serac and you say, "Oh, I don't know what that is. Who is that? What is that?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, go play the Tomb of Horrors,
Yeah.
and you will know. you 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 want to know what the heck they're talking about when they say the Isle of Dread? Go play the Isle of Dread. You want to know what they're talking about when they talk about some of the characters that have come up? Play adventures where they are involved, or read the campaign books. That's just that process. So I really feel like I suspect that Hasbro executives have insisted that the cosmology, a lot of the Greyhawk stuff, and the law section
Mm-hmm.
be included to reinforce copyright for their intellectual
You
property.
could. Yeah.
I really do feel like that's probably what's going on here. It's a big section, and which I feel like could have been used for something more important. And the problem is not that it doesn't help new people
Mm-hmm.
connect and know a little bit about the different law stuff that's happened in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they'll only get to use it once.
Mm.
It's a one shot wonder. And I've always been of the opinion that a dungeon master guide is always better when you force them to go back and use it again and again
Yeah.
and again and again and again and again, because the tools in there can be used more than once.
Yeah. That's true, but I mean, it's also not too far off from like the first two chapters. Once you read them once, you
Yeah,
either retain
yeah,
them or you don't. And
yeah,
this is just I realize this is more of a fluff piece, but I like this part. So and it's there's just I would take the lore glossary. I will take the lore glossary and Greyhawk over Bastions and Cosmology. And I think I still saved some pages.
yeah, yeah, probably did.
Yeah. But yeah. Interesting.
What
And then
what
they've
did you
got some
think of
maps. They got some maps
now?
that I'll never use.
I wanna ask your opinion. What did you think of the Appendix B and the map section?
They're cool. I mean, if that's once you use a map once, though, are you gonna use it again? Like, oh, this map again. I mean,
Well, well, I think though that this section, and I complained a lot about the last one because of the maps they provided in the old one.
uh I mean,
But
they're good maps.
the maps
Amazing.
in the back of the book, they're generic
Yeah.
locations. They're locations that a dungeon master will reuse often, and they can be copied easily because in the book they're in black and white,
Yeah.
not in color. Obviously, not very impressive if you want to put it on a virtual tabletop as assets, but that's all right.
Yeah.
The maps are done by Dice Logo, who's very famous as a creator, and you can go and find hundreds of free maps on his website, but you really do have to trawl, right, to get to them. They have picked out some very good locations, map locations like a crypt. You can reuse a crypt over and over again.
I'm looking through
A
those. Yeah.
caravan encampment, maybe you won't use that much, but there's no point having a campfire. It's too simple. A village, absolutely, you can reuse villages. Are usually their structure is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's got one type of dragon lair, so you maybe you know what not might not use this over and over again, but you've at least got a dragon lair. Great. You got a hideout, you probably reuse that one. A farmstead, absolutely. A keep, absolutely. A manor, absolutely. Mine, great. Roadside inn, perfect. Ship, they're pretty much the same. Spooky house, well, it's kind of like a manor, but it's just a spooky house. Yes, you can use that again. You know, and then the Underdark Warren, it's a bit niche, but you could reuse it.
Yeah.
Volcanic caves, absolutely, you could reuse that. Wizard's Tower, you reuse that.
Yeah.
And I really like the inclusion of the Greyhawk map and the city map in the back. Really smart as a pull-out poster.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Now, for those of you who want to whine, piss, and moan about the fact that the maps are in black and white and you can't put them on a virtual tabletop and make them look cool, guess what? The online version of the Dungeon Master Guide includes the full color virtual tabletop maps that aren't in black and white if you're using it as part of the D&D Maps application tool.
Mm.
So if you use the D&D Maps application tool, they're not in black and white. All those maps are provided to you in color. Stick it on a virtual tabletop, sweet as. So you can get them. It's not a problem. There is the pretty version as well. So I like this. I think it. Some of them aren't going to get reused, but the vast majority covers almost all the bases.
Yeah. Yeah. They're beautiful maps, for sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
Well done, Wizards of the Coast. I like this. This is a good idea. Tracking sheets, mate. Tracking
Oh,
sheets.
tracking sheets. We
Ooh,
do have more, don't we?
ooh. We do. We only got the tracking sheets, the index, and the sum up, which is nice and short. But
Yeah.
what did you think of the tracking sheets? I'm kind of curious as to your response to them.
You know, sometimes you need a starting point. Some. I mean, it gives you an idea. I mean, you can just look at this game expectations. Okay. And then as you become more experienced as a dungeon master or whatever else, you may or may not use that. So I
Hmm.
think, I mean, sure, why not? I mean, some people, we all structure things in our own ways. I'm a bit of, I jot things down on post-it notes and struggle to find it when I need it.
Hmm.
But some people like this level of organization, and I think these are. There's some that are more useful than others,
Hmm. So
um,
I think the
but I think
things,
they're a
the
good
ones
idea.
that I saw that weren't that useful was the campaign journal
Mm,
wasn't that great. The campaign conflicts and magical items for characters. A good idea to have a table, how many magic items the characters have, but the table itself, I question the number that they put on there.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
campaign journal was pretty bad.
yeah,
It wasn't a
yeah.
good product as
So,
far as
so
I could
like I'm
see.
looking at this one here, uh, campaign conflicts. It's a
Hmm.
sheet that just has conflict one,
Yeah,
two, and three, and then adventurers first versus.
yeah,
Now,
that's bad.
well, the sheet itself isn't really good. The idea of keeping track of that is. So like for me, like I stated previously, I keep track of most of my stuff in Google Docs, and I'll put
Hmm.
NPCs that are important. I put them in a different color. And
Hmm.
then I can go through and I can search through those and stuff. This would get lost in the shuffle for me.
Yeah,
I don't think I'd spend much time writing that. But it gives you the idea to keep track of conflicts, which I
yeah,
think is good. I think you should keep track of conflicts because 5 sessions later, an NPC should recur that, be like, oh yeah, remember me? Haha. um,
yeah,
but and then there's some of these that are well designed that I could probably print out and use.
yeah. The good tracking sheets I felt, or either good or passable, were the game expectations, the travel planner, the NPC one, although I felt like the NPC one was missing a few things. The settlement tracker, the Bastion one, and if you're going to use Bastions, and the DM character tracker. I thought they were reasonable You know, they were the better of them.
Yeah.
But as you say, man, everybody does their tracking and note
Yeah.
taking differently. It's a nice idea. I wouldn't say they're hugely useful, frankly, because everybody's going to want to adjust things.
Mm-hmm.
At least the online versions, the PDFs are fillable, which is smart. That's
Yeah.
good,
That's a good
right?
idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And tracking sheets could and should have been a downloadable PDF, and they are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book, for me, since nobody really photocopies anything anymore, having a smaller version of all these sheets on one page as examples
Mm.
and just having the downloadable versions being full size would have saved a lot of space. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand why you'd do that, other than we want to push the page count out. Hang on, didn't Chris Perkins say he knew he could have a book that was 500, 600 pages long and he had to cut it back? This is something he could have cut back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, those little pictures on the tracking sheets are designed for a young child, not teenagers or adults. I'm not a fan of
I
that
like it.
approach. Um, but it's not the end of the world. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to spit tax and like, well, that just means that this game has gone to pieces, because it's not.
No. No.
They,
It's
they are really trying hard to show rather than tell you in this book.
yeah. The images that don't bother me at all. I think they're
Mm,
yeah they're cool.
yeah,
They're a little bit goofy. That's
yeah,
fine
they
with
are.
me.
They are. Some of them are
Yeah.
quite goofy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That one there. That puppy hellhound. The hellhound puppy. That one looks cool.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah, like and I say this for the character sheets, but I think it just goes for the whole book that
Mm,
um, we all are going to organize information. We're all going to absorb information. And we're all going to use information all in our own different ways. And there's going to be things in this book that I think are, is shite a good word to use? Can I use shite?
yes, you can.
Okay, I'm going to
It's a
utilize that word
technical
then.
phrase.
Okay. Yeah, so there's some of the stuff in here that I don't like, but somebody might be like, "Oh, I'm so glad that they put the cosmology in there because that's going to help me because we use that a lot in the games that I run." Or I'm super excited to try out these bastions. This is a kind of a little bit of a change of pace that I've been wanting to do, so this book provides that. So, I think they had a lot of people to please with the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
I think that's one of the hardest things, and I think I think they did pretty good.
Yeah.
I think they did.
Oh, when you look at the index,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah,
far better for
yeah.
finding stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They even included all the magic items this time listed in
Did they really?
in the index. So
Wow.
so if you're looking for a specific magic item, you can find it in the index. You don't
Wow.
have to page through. Like that's a big deal. I actually I look at this Dungeon Master Guide, and I don't know what you think, but I was looking at this and I was like, you just put every single YouTuber out of business, because there's nothing that are done that has not been said really in here in this
Mm-hmm.
book that YouTubers could make videos on.
Yeah.
There's really no point in doing so at all. If you've got Dungeon Master advice to give, like, there's nothing really to say anymore. It's
Yeah.
been done. I'm sure you can say, oh, I can find a different way of making it work,
Mm-hmm.
and start and putting the word mistakes that a DM makes, or
Oh yeah.
taboos or something like that, go
Yeah.
really clickbaity or whatever. But really, I think it puts pretty much everybody out of business. Well done. Should have been that way in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That little cottage industry has become thousands of channels now. but the good thing is that they kind of screwed the pooch on the homebrew stuff.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a market.
Oh yeah.
Everybody under the sun is going to be out there
Mm-hmm.
making a book that shows you how to make your own stuff now. It's going to be funny. So yeah, Dungeon Master Guide for 2024. I think you agree with me. It's a better book than the older 2014
much
one.
better than 2014. Yeah. Much
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Most of those big issues have been addressed. They just created new problems around home brewing. You
yeah. Yeah.
know.
And I think it goes to say, it's definitely not perfect. I like it. I'm glad I bought it. I've already probably read it more than I have the 2014 one, which is, but that's not to say that this is the best DM's guide out there. I mean, I think there's a lot of game master guides for like Tales of the Valiant, some of the older edition DM's guides, and they all have little bits and pieces that you could of information that you could get from them. I don't know if I'm making sense on that or not, but
No, I totally get it, and I agree.
This is really really good. But don't stop there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you have an opportunity to pick up something like this here, which is the Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide, that's one. This is one of my favorites. I think this one might be close to my favorite now. But this is right up there with it. This is a really
Well, that's
good
a
one.
toolbox, right?
Yeah.
That's a toolbox. Like if you want to build stuff, it is trying to help you build stuff. So for those of you who are unaware, yes,
Don't forget
exactly.
that. That was my first Dungeon Master guide right there.
Yeah. I guess for me, I think that I don't think the Dungeon Master, Dungeon Masters will get a lot of reuse from this new book, and to account for the expense, in my opinion, the reuse is going to be a problem. I never paid for the book, so I'm a cheap bugger, and somebody has paid for me to have the online version, so I didn't pay for it at all. I'm never going to buy the book myself unless somebody buys it for me, because there's nothing in here that I need at all. So for me, it's useless. And but as a beginner, as your first book, if you've never had a Dungeon Master guide, it's probably the right place to go.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I think so too. I think once you familiarize yourself, if you're aspiring to run games to be a dungeon master, I think familiarizing yourself with the player's handbook is your top priority. Making sure you know how that stuff works, and then I think you just open this up in chapter 1 and 2 and go to town. I think this is very well geared towards becoming new DMs. It doesn't have everything that you need in here because this doesn't come with experience and trial and error, which is where you're gonna learn a lot of your stuff. But this is going to. I think it's good. It's a good guide. I like it. Matt Nerdy wants to know if there was any new weapons or armor. I don't think there was. Was there?
Yeah, there are.
Is there?
There are new. Yeah, there's about 20 new common magic items from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and you'll find that all of the magic items that the cartoon characters from the D&D TV series, D&D TV series, the cartoon series, all their magic items are on there. The cloak was already in there in the older version, and I believe they have included a couple of extra items, summoning cube and something else. I think they changed the Cube of Force as well. So it's essentially like a new magic item because apparently it didn't work before. And Baba Yaga's dancing broom, and I think there's another Baba Yaga item in there as well. So there is a few. There's not a lot of extra stuff, but you don't have to worry about that because now that they've put it out and they've added their contribution. Every YouTuber under the sun who no longer can make money making Dungeon Master advice videos has no choice but to start writing frantically and making magic item books so that you will actually have something that's new. So it's not going to be a problem. And if you're lucky, they'll include some homebrew advice as well, so you can make your own stuff with some tools.
Yeah. RPG Grandma says Easter eggs from the cartoon. Yes, exactly right. So the cartoon characters, they included their weapons in here. So you've got the energy bow for Hank. Let me see here. I think I found the shield earlier. Yeah, right there in the middle, you'll recognize Eric's shield. And then I believe a few of the other ones are in there as well. So yeah, they included those, which I thought was really, really cool. Also, I do want to say for everybody in the chat, thanks for still hanging out with us. We've been going for 3 hours. I see Matt Nerdy. Good to see you, Matt. Thanks for joining us. RPG Graham is in there. Thank you for joining us. Are we done?
Yeah, we are. And you were right. 3 hours.
I told you. I told you.
Your forecast was correct. Yeah, he knows me too well.
Before we go, Billy's Oversized Club. So you said it was in there. I couldn't find it. You said it was like a Thunder Club or something?
Yeah, so it's like a Mall of Thunder or something like that, or a Club of Thunder or a Thunder Club. Yeah, I can't remember whether it's called
Okay.
Club or Mall or Thunder something. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what we're dealing with there in terms of his.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'll look for it later. But yeah,
Yeah.
supposedly they're all supposed to be in there. Yeah, yeah. Cool. You ready to get out of here?
I am. And I know you are too.
Yeah, I am too. So thanks everybody for watching, and let us know if you've watched all the way to the end here what you thought of the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. Please be nice and be kind. Hopefully we didn't mess too many things up or anything, but I think that was a good review. Thanks, Fred, for suggesting the idea and taking the lead on this.
And
Oh, yeah.
don't forget, yeah, these, yeah. And is there where's number 2, man?
Yeah,
'Cause
number
these,
2's
these books are pretty good, man.
Yeah.
You know,
I will say
puzzle
too
books
that
in particular.
the Quintessential Guide to Monster Encounters is now at a low price, $9.99 for the PDF, $29.99. If you want to know how to run monster encounters, this book will help you. There you go, my little DM's guide. Yeah, cool. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching, and on to the next.